Not all martial arts were created equal. That even more so applies to martial arts for women's self-defense. While many martial arts claim that size and strength doesn't matter, in reality, it does. Luckily, some martial arts are much better at dealing with bigger and stronger opponents than others, but many people are wrong about which martial arts these are. Also, choosing the right martial art for self-defense can be an extremely important decision, as you can spend years learning the wrong martial art and achieve very little. So in order to shed some light and debunk various martial arts myths, and to offer a guide to choosing the best martial art for women's self-defense and for smaller and weaker people, I asked my friend and fellow YouTuber Ramsey Dewey, a longtime martial arts and MMA coach, to rank together the best martial arts for women's self-defense. My main martial art that I practiced for most years used to be my bread and butter. Irony with Aikido is that it promotes itself as a martial art, giving you the solution for a smaller person against a bigger person. That tends to be the case for women. So women usually find Aikido appealing because of that promise that, oh, you're going to come in as a smaller person and you're going to learn to use the energy of the opponent and throw them around. And I think many smaller people, and in this case women, they think like, oh, Aikido is the ideal martial art. But as most people know, and as definitely you know, Aikido isn't really what it promises to be. The training is cooperative. There's no pressure testing. What works with a person who's grabbing you gently and cooperatively will not work in a real stressful situation against someone who's really trying to smash you down.
It's a very different scenario than getting manhandled.
Right,
on the streets.
Exactly. Right. And so I will not give Aikido a great point by any means whatsoever. But the only reason I would not give Aikido an F, actually two reasons. One is you're learning to fall safely, which I think is a great tool for.
And that's a big deal.
Right, exactly.
That's a big deal. Most major injuries that happen in street altercations generally happen because of the street itself and hitting your head on it.
Right,
so
exactly.
If you know how to fall safely and avoid that, that's huge.
100%. Somebody's pushing you and you're protecting your head, rolling around, standing up, running away. I think that can be very helpful. You're also learning a little bit about dealing with grips. Like that's where I learned my grip fighting initially. But again, you're not training it against resisting opponents, so that's not a huge advantage. It's more like theoretical than practical. You still need to practice it, and you don't get that practice in Aikido. But the other thing which is beneficial is I think you're learning some sense of awareness because of the multiple attackers training. That's not how multiple attackers work. That's not going to teach you how to deal with multiple attackers. But in Aikido, what I discovered is when three people are trying to get here and your goal is to kind of move around in the space and use each person as an obstacle for the other person, that kind of gives you some sense of awareness. Or you're rolling and there's like hundreds of people in a big seminar and you want to make sure you don't roll onto someone. You become quite aware of your surroundings, like handling the space, which I think is a benefit for self-defense, kind of making sure you feel or see the bench behind you or just being aware of who's where. But again, that's still teaching you only that much because you're not really being attacked by those three people. So, but because of those reasons, I will not give Aikido an F. I will stay at D-. Would you agree with that point?
Yeah, I'd say that's fair. Better than nothing, probably. And as far as my take on Aikido, and all the Aikido nerds on the internet will be, Ramsey, how dare you judge Aikido? You're not even an Aikido practitioner. Well, I've trained with a bunch of Aikido practitioners who've come to my MMA gym and actually, sparred for real. And I've learned a few things about Aikido. It works infinitely better if you are large, strong, and physically imposing. And two, if you already know how to fight.
Right.
If those two things are met, you can make some Aikido movements work pretty well. That being said, the average woman is not a large, physically imposing, strong man who already knows how to fight.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, personally, there are a few techniques I've gleaned from Aikido that I use from time to time in grappling, but That's not the same as going to a school, training for a year just in that style and hoping to defend yourself from a physical altercation.
Right, right. And that's a great point too. I think too many times, too many people, they focus on the techniques as the definition of the martial art, where it's like, oh, look, this wrist lock, it's from Aikido. That means because somebody pulled it off in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that means Aikido works. It's like, no, that wrist lock exists in 10 different martial arts, but what matters
Yeah,
is
with 10 different training methodologies.
right, exactly. What matters is how you train it, whether you develop the skills that will teach you to pull it off. And even if it's like a couple of wrist locks work from Aikido, I think so many people focus on wrist locks in proving that it works. Even myself, although I don't heavily invest into it, but if I pressure test Aikido, it usually ends up being wrist locks. But wrist locks is just a small part of Aikido. What about all the 80 other percent of throws around, various throws and turns and twists, and where you're supposed to use the energy of your opponent? That doesn't come up almost at all anywhere. So anyway, just without elaborating too much, I think too many times people forget that, or personally for me, a martial art is usually defined by not as much about the techniques as the training methodology. And Aikido usually is cooperative and very sterile, very like clean, no pressure testing. And I think that's the downfall of it. And that's why it's not suitable, especially for women and true self-defense. Would you agree?
Sure.
Right.
Absolutely. One quick story. I had a student who was an Aikido black belt from Greece, fairly small guy. And he comes to my gym and he trains for about 6 months or so. And after about 6 months of training, I'm watching him spar, and he actually pulled off one of those cool looking flippy Aikido throws. And afterwards I was like, I've never seen anybody do one of those in real life against any level of resistance. And he said, well, that's the whole reason I'm coming to this MMA class, so I can learn how to fight so that I can use some of my Aikido.
Right.
I was like, oh, that's a very interesting perspective.
Right.
Learn how to fight first so that you can use Aikido.
100%. And I've been there myself, and luckily I haven't stayed in that stage for a long time. But that's the crazy part. It's like, for me, I did that for about a half a year, like trying to make my Aikido work by learning other martial arts, where eventually I realized, like, why am I just not learning other martial arts which work? Like, what's the point of trying to squeeze a square peg into a round hole? It's like,
it's a sunk cost fallacy, man.
Right.
A sunk cost fallacy. You put so much time and effort. You want to make it feel like you didn't waste the time, right?
Right.
I went through the same thing with Taekwondo for the longest time, and I love Taekwondo. It's all of the we'll talk about Taekwondo eventually. We'll get there. We'll get there.
Right.
Okay, onward and outward.
Great. Okay, so we're fine with Aikido being a D. So the next one we're moving on to is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Again, it's one of the martial arts which I have comparatively in my martial arts journey. I have one of the most experience with. I'm still not super advanced, but I'm familiar with the martial art. Now, I am aiming to rank BJJ very high, primarily because I think that BJJ delivers on the promise which Aikido makes, and many martial arts make, about the smaller person defeating a bigger opponent. But it actually does that while Aikido feels that, and I think most martial arts feel that they're not able to deliver that. So especially when we're thinking about women who usually are smaller and less physically capable as a big male attacker in the street. And first of all, do you agree with that that concept idea that BJJ delivers on the promise that a smaller person can beat a bigger opponent?
Well, much more than most other martial arts. I mean, everybody has heard this. I heard this since I heard of martial arts. Martial arts allow you to defeat a larger, stronger opponent.
Yeah.
And most people never really saw that until 1993 when Royce Gracie choked out some dudes in the octagon.
Right.
At which point they were like, well, let's go learn that, because that delivers on the promise, right?
Right.
That being said, how many women at the jiu-jitsu gyms that you've visited or trained at are able to defeat larger, stronger opponents. I know a few. And these are women who have spent years and years, consistently training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Again, it's not a 3-day seminar, not one quick tip to defend yourself. It's a whole system, not just of techniques, but a system of pedagogy, a system of consistent sparring, and a system of athletic training.
Mm-hmm.
And without all those attributes, the technique, the athleticism, learning proper aggression, etc., you're not going to be able to defeat anyone, let alone a larger, stronger opponent.
Yeah, that's a great point. Now that you said it, but there are those videos online of tiny BJJ black belt defeats, like the not the wrestler dude, but like
the big bodybuilder.
Exactly. Like there are videos out there like that, and they prove like, oh, that's possible. But at the same time, you're putting the right emphasis that it's still usually a black belt who competes all the time. So it's like a superwoman. And if we're talking about a regular woman, a regular person with a single year of training, yeah, okay, that won't make as much of a difference. Still, in my mind, I'm going to be interested to see how it compares to other martial arts, because right now I'm thinking, okay, BJJ versus other martial arts, I still want to rank it high. And also because there's grip fighting and you're learning to escape grips against pressure, which I think is a very valuable self-defense tool, especially if you're not trying, if your goal is not necessarily to just dominate the other person, but to survive, to escape.
Sure.
There is, sorry, you wanted to add something?
Sure.
No,
yeah.
Okay. And the other last thing is there is that problem that many people like to point to, which is BJJ, you're not learning to deal with multiple attackers. Also, I guess now the idea of defense against a knife.
Maybe not the way you train it.
Sorry?
Maybe not the way you train it.
Yeah. And then yeah.
Tell
so
you want a fun BJJ training exercise? Just challenge all the white belts at once to try to tap you out. It's fun. It's fun.
Did you ever try that? Is that?
Yeah, all the time.
Okay.
All the time.
And how does that end?
If there's more than 3, it gets really hard. Like generally, like 3 white belts I can handle at the same time using only grappling techniques. More than 3, oh man, then you got 1 on each leg, 1 on each arm. Maybe 1 jumps behind you. It gets tough after that, man.
Okay, it's not like in the action movies like Bruce Lee and everything. Not,
Well, if I could throw a spinning hook kick along the way, but maybe. We'll see.
So
but more than 3 people, man, it gets 3 is hard. Like that requires a very specific skill set, but more than 3, man. Even white belts can take you out.
Oh, nice. I'll keep this exercise in mind, though. That's a good one. I don't think I'm ready, but I should try it. So yeah, multiple opponents, not a great deal in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I mean, depends on how you train, as I said, but most people they focus on one person, and there's many places don't train knife defense or weapon defense. Many martial arts are guilty of that too, or not guilty, but they don't. So I guess still, for me, I wanted to give an A, but after you made a good point that there's a difference between a lady who has been training for a decade in BJJ and a lady who's been training for a year, I'll still give it an A-. Would you be comfortable at staying there?
I understand why you give it that rating, and compared to many other martial arts, if we're just comparing it to other martial arts, sure, we can put it up there, fairly top tier. I would give it more like a B-.
Okay.
And here's the pros and the cons of BJJ, especially as it's usually taught today. Jiu-Jitsu, modern sport Jiu-Jitsu, which is what you're usually going to find when you go into a Jiu-Jitsu gym, is often very divorced from self-defense. And I say this as someone who's been practicing Jiu-Jitsu for a very long time, very long time. So how many Jiu-Jitsu gyms have you visited where the training went something like this? You do a warm-up, you shrimp across the mat, maybe do some calisthenics, do some jumping jacks, whatever. And then the coach is like, all right, guys, let me show you this technique from half guard. And he shows you some sweep from half guard or something, some deep half guard thing.
Right.
And then he's like, all right, let's roll. And then you spend an hour rolling.
Right. Yeah.
And while that's not the worst training method, it's far from the best. Because what usually happens, people see that half guard technique, and then they start rolling, and they never ever hit it live until maybe 5 years later when it finally clicks, because eventually after 5 years they've finally had enough repetition. But it's a deeply flawed training methodology.
Right.
But again, it's still better than a lot of what's out there, simply because of the element of live rolling. But there is, I could complain a lot about jiu-jitsu not starting on the feet. How many gyms don't start on the feet? This is a deep flaw.
Right. That's true. That's
all of the really good gyms that I know, all of the good ones start on the feet. Why? Because whether you are a competition guard puller or an MMA fighter who likes to out wrestle your opponents, or somebody who is training for self-defense, starting from the feet teaches you how to get to the ground under the most ideal conditions, safely, without injury, and in the position that you want. Whether that's guard, mount, standing with the other guy down below you, etc. And if you rob yourself of that experience, you're out of luck, man.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, a huge number of jiu-jitsu gyms rob themselves of that experience. Now, before I spit on jiu-jitsu too much, the pros, after a year of jiu-jitsu training, you're going to experience enough hours on the mat with a wide enough variety of people to experience enough pressure,
right,
and enough spazzy white belts trying to claw your eyes out, and enough of that so that you won't freeze in a violent altercation. Because the most common reaction to a violent attack is to freeze. It's not to run away. It's not to fight back. It is to freeze. It's what most people do the first time they're attacked, for real.
Right.
We have in our mind, I'm going to do this ninja move, I'm going to do this kung fu technique. And the reality is most of us just freeze because we've never experienced that type of pressure. The bonus of BJJ is that it gives you tactile, constant pressure. And so you understand, at least to some degree, what violence feels like.
Right.
And you become comfortable being uncomfortable.
Right. Okay.
So for that reason, I would give it the B-, which I feel I'm being pretty generous there.
Okay.
But
I still wonder if, as we put other martial arts on the table, whether we will move BJJ around. Like, I'm still thinking, like, but it may be true. I may be biased. Some people are giving me shit for me being
sure. I mean, there
happy.
are some coaches, some gyms, some
Right.
BJJ gyms that I would rank as an A, and some I would rank as an F.
Right.
And this is so
Right.
the B- is like a median for me.
Got it. That's a good point. Okay, so we leave it there right now. We'll see if it still moves around. But so far, it's I'm okay with B-. Now, the next one is, have you bumped into a thing known as Bujinkan?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. Because
the ninjas.
Not everyone knows. But in the worst case, if somebody doesn't know Bujinkan, just imagine ninjutsu. Imagine ninjas. But let's see.
Yes.
Bujinkan is a big organization. I'm happy you bumped into it. And to get the ball rolling, I also know
I know quite a few Bujinkan practitioners, actually, over at the old JX Fight Club where I used to train over here in Shanghai. We shared the mat every Tuesday night with a group of ninjutsu enthusiasts from the Bujinkan Dojo.
Okay, nice. Well, for
and
me,
they would do their rolls. They bow to their little Shinto shrine. They practice their goofy looking moves. But yeah, let's talk about it.
Okay, so I actually bumped into a high-ranking practitioner, not only practitioner, instructor, like way, like high up. Like, I think they have like 15 black belt ranks, and I think he was like 12 or something. So I have some direct experience as well. I analyzed the martial art, and unfortunately, I think it's actually very similar to Aikido in many aspects, especially the training methodology. It's all about
very compliant.
Right, very compliant. So I tend to want to put it at a similar place to Aikido. There are weapons, so I guess that I mean,
Yeah,
there's
but who
weapons in
carries a
Aikido.
daikatana around with
But
them?
that's the thing, right? Exactly.
Like,
And
who
again,
carries ninja claws with them? I mean,
right.
probably not.
Right. And so I guess the only reason I will not give it an F is for a similar reason to Aikido is you're also learning safe falling. And I think there may be, and this is also a point that Icy Mike made in our general self-defense talk, was that if you're a ninja, you may be thinking more about evading and escaping and looking for the perfect escape route or hiding and learning to hide. Like these things, yeah, they can actually come into play and they can actually benefit you. Obviously, I think they should be still trained under pressure, because when your mind is freaking out, probably you won't remember your ninja games as much as you want to. And if you would be like really pursued by people and you'd have to literally hide in the training because you know you will get your ass kicked, I think that would make the skill much more effective. But still, there is the possibility that it would provide some benefit, the hiding, the escaping, being aware of your surroundings. So I think I'm thinking maybe D minus. What about you?
You know, I'm going to rank it higher than Aikido, and I'll tell you why. Because
Yes.
if I had just seen these guys from the outside, I would give it an F right away. Like, this is ridiculous. My goodness, it's a bunch of nonsense.
Yeah.
But since I actually got the chance to get to know these guys in this Bujinkan group pretty well, understand their motivations, understand who they were, why they were doing what they were doing, I'd rate it higher because what I realized is what they were doing was a historical reenactment, kind of like HEMA, historical European martial arts.
Yeah.
So none of these guys, and I don't know if this is true across the board, but simply the particular Bujinkan group that I got to know. And I trained with some of these guys as well. They would come to my MMA class sometimes, and we'd exchange some knowledge. But none of them were under the delusion that they were doing this for the streets. Essentially, they understood this is a historical reenactment where they were very realistic about their abilities, what they could do, what they couldn't do. And when they would come to cross-train with me with MMA, they weren't a bunch of wimps. Like if you look at some of the compliant drills they were doing, it's laughable. I should send you a video. I got the short video clip. I'll send it to you. They're doing this goofy thing with a rope, and it's hilarious.
Okay.
But when they actually came and trained and sparred in the MMA class, they weren't pushovers. Like they understood what violence was, but it's not something they necessarily learned from Bujinkan. So I'm a little conflicted.
Right.
Because a lot of people, say, who go to an Aikido class work under the delusion that I'm this badass samurai and I'm going to be able to stop any attacker with my wrist locks or whatever the thought process is. Whereas with the Bujinkan guys, it was, I know my limitations. I know, dressing up like a ninja and waving a sword around, that's what I do for fun.
Right.
And so if I'm going to invest some skill points, if you will, into self-defense, then I'm going to look elsewhere.
Yeah.
So that mentality, I think, is extremely valuable.
Very good point. Being realistic about your training. I like that. And actually, to add to that, the instructor that I mentioned was fairly also critical. He wasn't as critical about the Bujinkan thing, but he was also pointing out that, okay, I'm not a self-defense expert. We're not really becoming like great fighters. He was aware to quite a great degree compared to, as you mentioned, like many Aikido instructors. So I think that realism, knowing your limitations, I agree that deserves a spot up. So good, nice. So D is fine with us.
And
right? Yeah.
I would also rank it above Aikido for this other reason. One, the three most important things for self-defense, as far as women's self-defense or anybody else, if we're talking about surviving or coming out on top in a violent altercation, arm yourself, have friends around you who have your back, and be as athletic as you can. Okay. And one thing I noticed about the Bujinkan folks is that they had each other's back. They hung out. They were friends inside and outside of the dojo. And when you got like 6 guys, even if they're a bunch of wimps, as we mentioned before about BJJ, if you got more than 4 guys who are just complete white belts and novices, they can take out an expert.
Yeah.
Secondly, is the mentality about carrying weapons. Even though they're not going to carry around a 15th century samurai sword on the streets, they still have this idea in their mind, having a weapon is better than not.
Yeah.
So, and third, they're getting out there and training, so they're going to be more athletic than if they're sitting on the couch.
Right.
So,
yeah, I like that. I was talking to this self-defense expert from Mexico, Bruno Orozco. His background is Aikido, but he's very realistic about Aikido, and he's like a legit self-defense guy. But one of the tips he gave me years ago when I was still searching for answers about self-defense, because I had no clue about it, he said, surround yourself with good people. Like, that was the same point. If you're with good people and you're not going to bad places, you're surrounded by trustworthy people, your chances of being attacked will dramatically decrease. That's not a pill that will save you from everything. And I think that, I guess, applies to many martial arts, and maybe even Aikido surrounds you with good people too. But I like what you pointed out, that Aikido is usually delusional, tends to be much more delusional, and that's actually so dangerous to think. And that was my case as well. Like, again, we're talking about, we're focusing on self-defense for women, but that applies to everyone, because for me, 5 guys attacked me and I didn't run away because I was like, okay, now I'm gonna do my Aikido moves, now I need to defend in Aikido. It's like, no,
oh man,
why did I think that? So yeah, I think realism definitely deserves extra points. So cool. D for Bujinkan.
All right.
Good. Okay.
Let's lock it in.
Nice. I mean, we can still move it around in case, but for now, D. So next one is a big one, boxing. And
boxing.
Yes. And I am excited about this one. I think, I was all hyped about, hey, BJJ is great because it can deal with bigger opponents.
Yeah.
But
there are some great stories about guys like Jack Dempsey who knocked out multiple opponents in his 60s.
Right, nice.
But then again, we're talking about a former heavyweight champion of the world, one of the all-time greats, not a woman who trained boxing for a year.
Right.
So that's a very different thing.
Right. But I think that this is where there's a lot of potential, at least in my mind, is because, and correct me if I'm wrong, because my boxing experience is still limited, but BJJ takes a significantly long time to master and become really comfortable at. Well, a year may not necessarily be enough, but boxing, I think it seems to me that boxing is one of those martial arts which can really make you, it can teach you in a year, it can actually teach you already to strike fairly well and to learn to move on your feet much more than many other practices. And it's also one of those few martial arts which can actually teach you to deal against multiple opponents because you're moving on your feet, you're evading, etc. Obviously, there's some.
It's streamlined, man.
Sorry?
It's streamlined.
In what sense?
Boxing it's a streamlined combat system, if you will.
Okay.
In other words, you take away all the unnecessary stuff and focus on the most high percentage strikes. In other words, your fists.
Right. Okay. And that's really great, because then also too, like BJJ on the contrary side, it can be guilty of teaching a lot of flashy techniques, as you mentioned. Like a big beginner comes in and they're like, hey, I'm going to teach you this rubber guard or whatever. But boxing, you're probably really learn the fundamentals and you're going to learn what's effective. I think there is that downside that you're not learning grappling. If somebody grabs you boxing, well, I guess you can punch with the other hand, but if somebody grabs you with both hands, but a martial art cannot be perfect. But I think, and punching, if a woman punches a guy, that's very useful. So I could talk more, but I think, again, I'm hyped about boxing and women's self-defense. I guess I'm between A and A minus. I guess A minus because you're not learning grappling skills, and I think a woman will likely be grabbed in a self-defense situation. Somebody can strike her too, but I think it's a likely scenario that somebody grabs. So maybe it would be great if boxing would give that, but it doesn't. So maybe that's why it's not A for me, but A minus. I'm happy here. What about you?
I would rank it equally with BJJ under the B minus tier.
Okay.
And here's why. Because it has some of the same problems, but the inverse problems that BJJ does. Okay. As you mentioned, it doesn't address grappling just like BJJ doesn't address striking. If you've never been punched in the face before, you're probably going to freeze. And I mentioned BJJ is great because when you experience the pressure of a violent assault, somebody taking you down, somebody lying on top of you, something like that, you won't freeze if you've experienced this a bunch of times. The pro of boxing is if you've been boxing for a year, you probably sparred at least a couple of times, hopefully.
Yeah.
And so you know what it's like to get punched in the face. I mean, that's a huge wake-up call. Rokas, when was the first time you got punched in the face in your life? Do you remember?
Great question. I can't say I remember like that moment.
Like a real punch, man.
Oh, like a real punch. It must be only after I started doing combat sports and got in with the sparring partner who was not going easy with me. But
okay.
We're talking.
What was that like for you? What was that moment like when you took that first real big punch?
I think I was gradually building up by lighter punches to the head. So maybe that wasn't as bad, but then I can say that even the light strikes to my face initially, they were just overwhelming. It just freaked out my brain. So for sure.
Yeah, because this space right here, this is sacred to a human being. This is our face. This is where we live, most of us anyway.
Right.
And so, hands getting up in here with violent intentions, with bad intentions, oh my goodness, it is demoralizing. It's absolutely demoralizing.
Right.
So the big bonus of boxing and why I would rank it high, even if it's a bad boxing gym, is getting that first punch out of the way. So you know what that feels like. That's huge. That's hugely important. Now, I'm not saying go out there and punch your students in the head. Don't. Just don't. Yeah. That's essentially something you got to earn in sparring. And most of your sparring should be light anyway. But if you've been boxing for a year, you're going to know what it's like to get punched in the head. And so it's not going to be this alarming, oh my goodness, my world's falling apart moment if it happens on the streets, if you will.
Yeah.
So because of that alone, it's going to deserve a pretty high spot there. Now, the cons. A year of boxing training for the average woman, is she going to be able to knock out multiple opponents like Jack Dempsey did? Probably not. Is it going to give her some tools and pathways to cut angles, to create exits? Possibly. It won't address the issue of grappling, and I think a huge number of assaults on women involve grappling because they want to grab them, they want to put them on the ground, they want to lie on top of them, etc. They want to pin them. And so boxing does not address any of those issues.
Right.
That being said, another pro, how many bad women's self-defense techniques have you seen on the internet where they teach some convoluted escape to some equally convoluted situation where a straight right hand to the face would have solved the problem 100 times better?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
I mean, just think about it. You got the two-handed rape choke. They grab the neck like this, and they're like, now all you need to do is weave your hands in this complex fashion and then do a double flying wrist lock. I don't know. Making something up here.
Sure.
When it's like, how about punch him in the face or kick him in the groin, or just some basic strike would solve the problem so much better.
Right. So boxing does that, right?
So boxing does do that. That being said, boxing, we say that it's unarmed combat, except it's not. You're wearing weapons on your fists. Padded gloves are a weapon that allow you to punch recklessly without consequence, if you will. What I mean by that is you're not going to break your hands punching hard and recklessly in a boxing glove in the way that you might bare knuckle. Now, if you've trained bare knuckle for a significant amount of time, then you can develop a sensitivity to where and how to punch without serious injury to yourself. Now, if all of your boxing training is in 16-ounce gloves, when push comes to shove in a bare-knuckle street altercation, you are going to, it's going to be a very different kind of fight. So again, because of those reasons, there's a lot of good from boxing, and I'm rating it high because I know some of the martial arts coming up on this list won't be nearly as good.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's going to fall into a lot of the same issues that BJJ does for self-defense. So I'm going to give it B-.
Okay. I'm still curious if we'll raise it up a little bit as we will put others on the table.
Because we're going to run into Krav Maga and I'll be like, by comparison, it's godly.
Yeah. But
Spoiler
so far I see the point. B- is okay. So boxing B-. Okay. I'm still curious if we're gonna raise it up a little bit. But next one, we're coming back to a questionable area, which is capoeira. Now I'll be fair.
Capoeira, okay.
I'll be fair by saying I have not trained it yet. I don't know as much about it, so this is just an opinion based on observation. But my thought process is usually the way I see it is cooperative, so already that takes out a lot of points. There's no grabbing, there's no grappling. I've seen this one video, which is a really weird video, but it's all like big, tough guys doing capoeira, kind of like flow movement, and then suddenly they start like trying to grapple each other and hitting each other hard, and capoeira disappears.
Yeah, some capoeira schools do grapple, they do wrestle.
Right, but then
most don't. Most focus just on kicks.
Okay. And also too, in that, at least in that video, the grappling didn't look great, and it's just it seemed like capoeira just disappeared, and it's like, let's just rough and tumble. So that was not impressive. I guess kicking, if it would be possible to pull off a kick, and that could be great, but not like, it's easy to slip, it's easy to fall. Imagining a regular woman against a male attacker, usually bigger, I don't know, I just kind of want to go F. I guess maybe there's something I'm missing, footwork or something. You're laughing. You know more about capoeira than I do.
Yeah, I've trained in capoeira. I've done it for quite some time. I use a lot of capoeira techniques in mixed martial arts. But I understand where you're coming from, because most people do not train capoeira as a combative art.
Right.
They train it as a historical reenactment. They train it as a dance form. They train it for fun, for fitness. And that's all great, but we're talking about self-defense, practical self-defense for women. Now, as much as I love capoeira, if you are going to the average capoeira gym for self-defense, you will be sorely disappointed. Now, as I've mentioned, there are some capoeira gyms that focus on combative aspects that will involve, that will also do grappling, wrestling. I mean, the basic form of capoeira, the jinga, where you move from one stance to the opposite stance to a neutral stance with the hands up here, those are wrestling stances. And all of the kicks with the level change are feints and fakes to set up takedowns. But this is rarely ever taught. It's rarely ever taught. So the grappling aspect of capoeira that you're going to get in most gyms is either going to be non-existent or fairly weak. Now, if you understand going in, I'm going to learn this as a historical reenactment, I'm going to learn this as a dance style, etc., then you can think of it as a fitness class. And as a fitness class, it's phenomenal.
Okay.
I mean, you can get into phenomenal shape. But I mean, if we are just throwing the average one-year capoeira practitioner against, say, an average Aikido one-year practitioner, just based on physicality alone, I would give it to the capoeira practitioner.
That's a great point. I agree. Yeah.
Just because they're probably going to be more athletic.
Great point.
So the athleticism, that's not nothing. That's not nothing. So because of that, I would put it higher than an F. Now, some of the kicks, the meia lua, for example, meia lua and compasson, fantastic kick. I use this constantly. It's one of my favorites. However, most people absolutely suck at setting it up because the setup is generally not taught. Sparring almost never happens.
Right.
Generally, what they do in most capoeira clubs is they play this game, and they call it a game. They make no pretenses about it. It's a game.
Uh-huh.
And you have a circle. They play musical instruments. They sing songs, and you play fight. You get close, but not touching. And you sort of move around the other person, practicing your moves, showing what you can do, showing off some skills. You do that for a minute. You get out of the circle. The next person jumps in, and everybody has a good time. And again, as far as athletics, you can learn some great acrobatic, maybe even some tumbling skills, etc. But you're not going to learn how to fight doing that.
Yeah.
Especially after a year. Now, if you are, let's say, an MMA fighter and you train in capoeira, you can definitely glean some really cool stuff from that to bring to your style. I mean, some fighters like Conor McGregor, for example, was famous for using the meia lua and compasson in some of his fights. I don't know if he ever landed one, but people are like, whoa, he's doing this cool spinning kick, right?
Yeah.
But there is some cool stuff there.
Yeah.
That being said, again, most people aren't going to pick up on that. But because of the athleticism, I'm going to rank it higher than an F. I would put it probably about the same as Aikido. So because we gave Aikido, what was it, like a D-, because it's, the break falls and the rolling and so on. The tumbling is valuable. The athleticism, I would say, is equally valuable from capoeira. But you're not going to learn how to fight there.
Right. I really appreciate the fact that you brought in the physicality, because I think as much as I understand how important it is, for some reason, as we were talking about martial arts, I kind of was leaning into thinking more about the methodology, etc. But now that you brought the subject, it's like, yeah, that can be such a huge game changer, which many people disregard. And they do the mistake that essentially I already started doing this talk, where it's focusing on the martial art and forgetting that, no, actually just being physically tough can be a huge benefit in self-defense for, I believe, for women and for men. So yeah, I appreciate you bringing that in. And I was almost like, oh yeah, let's give a D to capoeira. But I guess the reason we gave D for Bujinkan is that there's more awareness about like escaping and hiding and potentially weapons, the whole group mentality. So sure, okay, well, and turns out you have a capoeira background, so if you agree about D-, for sure I agree as well. So is that okay, the D-, or?
Sure, let's keep it there for now.
Okay, so the next one is a big one. It's wrestling.
Okay,
and I will make a spoiler and say that in the talk with Ice Mike, speaking about general self-defense, he wanted wrestling to be S, like he's super hyped about it. And I saw the points behind it. The point was that wrestling makes you physically tough. It builds endurance. You're learning to deal with grabs, with being taken down. I personally don't know, because wrestling is not I don't have huge experience in wrestling, just from MMA training so far, but I'm not sure how wrestling plays into smaller versus bigger opponent. So that's where I will want to ask for your wisdom. But generally, I like the point, and I'm taking inspiration from what Mike said, that many times the self-defense systems which are effective, they're based very much on wrestling. So that kind of inspires me to want to rank wrestling high, and especially as you mentioned before, women's self-defense tends to be often related with grabs and grappling, and wrestling works on that. So I don't know, B, I'm looking forward for you to put it down lower, but I'll go for B.
Okay, well, let me make my mind up about this. I learned to wrestle as an adult, and it took me about 3 or 4 years before I started getting any good at it.
Okay.
And it's something I love. It's something I practice daily. And at this point in my life, it's something I'm pretty decent at, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm pretty proud of my wrestling skills, but we're talking about an average woman training for 1 year. People always talk about how wrestlers are tough, and this is true because we're talking about. And let me explain what happens in the United States, for example. The United States has a big wrestling culture in high school and in college. Okay, I grew up in a small farming town, and I knew a lot of guys who wrestled. I didn't wrestle in high school because I didn't understand the importance of it back then.
Sure.
But most of the guys on the wrestling team, here's what they did. They would wake up at like 4 a.m. to go milk the cows and do farm work and buck hay and whatever it was they did, put in like an hour, 2 hours of work before they would go to school early to have a wrestling practice before school. Then they'd go through their whole school day and maybe have another wrestling practice and then, come home and do more farm work. So these guys were already physically tough.
Right.
Like the difference between a farmer and the average city slicker as far as just toughness is huge. And a lot of American wrestlers anyway, and you could say this about, wrestlers from say Kazakhstan and these former Soviet republics. I met so many of these guys out here, very similar mentalities, who grew up in these rural areas, who are already tough by virtue of their lifestyle. Okay. And on top of that, they're wrestling every day and they're competing generally every week. And so within 4 years of high school, they have had hundreds of competitions against a 100%, not just resisting, but a guy trying to dominate them. There's a huge difference between somebody resisting you and somebody trying to dominate you.
Yeah.
And this is super important. It's one thing to pressure test a technique against someone who is simply not cooperating, and another thing to combat somebody who is trying to physically dominate you. So yeah, this is the reason why we always talk about why wrestlers are so tough. Right. It's part of it is the technique, because you have to be physically tough to do these, but the mindset of a competitive wrestler is very, very different from the average person. I mean, the average teenager, what are they doing? They're trying to shirk. They're trying to get away from as much work as they possibly can, right? They want to play video games. They want to have fun. They want to hang out with their friends. They want to, play on their phone. And what's a wrestler doing? They are cutting weight. They're self-sacrificing. They are, they're getting ready for the next meet. They're getting up early when it's not comfortable. They're putting themselves through torture. And for what reward? For maybe a hope of getting a scholarship so they can be the first guy in their family to go to college, something like that. Yeah. It's a different mentality. Now, is this a mentality that the average woman is going to get in a year, say as an adult attending a wrestling club? Probably not. Now, wrestling, let's look at the technique for a minute. Wrestling is the offensive aspect of grappling. It's the offensive aspect of grappling. We could call jiu-jitsu the defensive aspect of grappling. What I mean by that is, it is what puts you in position to impose your will, to attempt to dominate a struggle. Okay? In other words, if you want to remain on your feet, wrestling gives you that option. If you want to put the other person down on the ground, either pinning them or standing over them, wrestling gives you that option. If you want to duck under and get behind the guy, wrestling gives you that option. If you want to hit the guy with the earth and knock him out with a suplex or something like that, wrestling gives you that option. Okay? But as I mentioned, it took me about 3 or 4 years before I got any good at this stuff. Yeah. Now, I've seen some prodigies. I had a female student who was an absolute prodigy, and within 1 year, she could wrestle and wrestle pretty well. But she was the exception, not the norm. Right, yeah. I would say I'm more along the lines of the average person, and it took me about 3 or 4 years to develop any reasonable skill set with wrestling. Yeah. Is it worth training? Yes, absolutely. Is it a skill set that you need to fight for unarmed combat? Absolutely. Is it a skill set you need for fighting with a weapon? Yes, absolutely. And this is something a lot of people scratch their heads about. Okay. There was a treatise written by John Silver. He was a sword master, where he talked about the rapier, the long one-handed sword, where he said, in single rapier combat, almost always the better wrestler will kill his opponent. If neither man knows how to wrestle, the stronger man will usually kill his opponent. And when I first read that, I was like, what the heck? They have swords. Wouldn't they just stab each other? Why would it turn into a wrestling match?
Right.
And the answer is pretty simple. When you cross blades, when you come into a bind, then you're not stabbing each other anymore. Then you can get very close, and then you can start to wrestle. I mean, this is why jiu-jitsu developed in the first place. Because the samurai, their sidearm was the sword. And so if they're fighting on their feet, they're fighting with a sword. And if they're fighting with another guy or dueling with another guy, like Miyamoto Musashi did, as soon as they cross blades and go into a bind, it becomes a wrestling or a grappling situation, which is why we have jiu-jitsu. That's where it came from.
Yeah.
It came from samurai sword fighting, if you will. So self-defense situations often involve weapons. However, we're not talking about swords. We're generally talking about a guy with a gun when you don't have one, or a guy with a knife when you don't have one. And a year of wrestling is probably not going to save you in that situation. But we could say that about every single one of these unarmed martial arts styles.
Sure. Yeah.
So where are we going to rank wrestling? Well, I would say because every wrestling match starts on the feet, every wrestling practice in many ways is more realistic than sport jiu-jitsu situations. For example, sitting up in your guard when the other guy's standing over you, that's a terrible thing to do in a fight.
Right.
It's a great thing to do in a jiu-jitsu tournament. There are tons of great options from there in a jiu-jitsu tournament. But as soon as the guy can strike you, it is radically different. A wrestler, on the other hand, doesn't put themselves in that situation.
Right.
So this is tough. I'm going to put wrestling the same as boxing and jiu-jitsu in this case.
I thought
at the B minus. I know you wanted me to put it up higher.
I thought you were about to.
If this was a list of Ramsey's personal favorite martial arts, I'd put it up in the A tier, man.
Yeah.
But as far as the question, we have to remember that it's an average woman training for 1 year. How much is this going to help her in self-defense?
I'm curious, because you made a great point. The big flaw of PJJ, many places starting on the ground. Wrestling does not do that. Why then? Why would you not give?
If you do start on the ground in wrestling, you start in a real position that you're commonly going to find yourself in.
Okay.
Such as the parterre position, one guy's down, one guy's on top of them.
Right. So what's the reason you're not giving it a B? I'm just curious to learn the logic behind it.
B, because there's a lot more that's going to happen in a violent assault against a woman that 1 year of wrestling is not going to address.
Okay.
So I guess I should clarify what I would need to give an S, the highest grade.
Okay.
This would be like, this martial art will give you the tools, the skill set, and the training methodology that you need to survive most violent altercations with 1 year of training. That being said, I don't think we're going to reach that point if those are the parameters, but that's how I'm judging these right now.
Right. Okay. Got it. Okay. I think it sounds like wrestling was close to B, but I'm okay. It's D minus. So next one is Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, classical Jiu-Jitsu, as some would say. I will make a disclaimer straight away. For me, I have not trained it. This is opinion, observation based. So I'll be quick. I'd say from the analysis I've done and what I observed, classical Japanese Jiu-Jitsu very rarely has sparring. I know some schools do, but that's the exception versus the rule. I guess for me it's not an F because they do have some strikes, they do have some kicks. There's again no pressure testing, so that's not really applicable, but still I guess it gives you the knowledge of how that works, maybe some grip fighting. Yeah, I don't know, I want to give it a D minus. But maybe, do you have more experience with?
Sure, yeah. I've trained at a few different
What have you
Japanese
not trained,
jiu-jitsu
Ramsey?
schools. I've trained at a lot of martial arts schools, man. I've trained
Okay.
a lot. It's what I do, man. I get out there and train. It's kind of my thing. But Japanese jiu-jitsu is a mixed bag. It's kind of a collective term for pretty much any jiu-jitsu style from Japan that isn't judo, basically. Even judo could fit in that bag. We could technically call judo Goshin Jiu-Jitsu, which is a Japanese style. So Japanese jiu-jitsu is pretty much divided up into two camps: Nihon Jiu-Jitsu and Goshin Jiu-Jitsu.
Okay.
And that is essentially the what is allegedly the pure form from the samurai, originally passed down traditionally, and then Goshin is like the bastardized version for modern times, if you will, which is why judo is considered Goshin Jiu-Jitsu, because it's been changed. It's not the pure lineal exact carbon copy of what the samurai supposedly taught. That being said, people who are saying we are teaching you exactly what the samurai taught are generally lying to you and making stuff up. So I have two main experiences with Japanese jiu-jitsu. One was a school called Budoshin Jiu-Jitsu. And it wasn't good. I didn't know that at the time. The instructor seemed to be able to know his stuff. He was able to do the techniques that he was showing, but he wasn't a good teacher, to be honest.
Okay.
Like nobody else in the class was ever able to do any of this stuff. There was some live grappling, but it wasn't good. It was crappling is what it was. Crap plus grappling. But there was some. I mean, people would grab each other and try to throw each other on the ground, try to dominate once they got there. It wasn't great. It was better than nothing. But I didn't learn any real grappling skills from it, to be honest. I learned intellectual martial arts on an intellectual level from that class. My other experience was, I guess you could call him a Goshin Jiu-Jitsu instructor, a guy named Michael Peace, and he's dabbled in a bunch of different grappling arts, including various Japanese styles, and he knew how to grapple. He was a good grappler. He taught grapplers who competed and so on, and he knew what he was doing. And it was very similar to a Brazilian jiu-jitsu class, but it wasn't called Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
So Japanese jiu-jitsu runs the gamut of something like that, where it's basically like a BJJ class but a different name, to a bunch of absolute nonsense and everything in between. So if I was to tell the average woman, go to a Japanese jiu-jitsu school, you never know what you're going to get doing that. You just don't. The chances are high you're going to get some crap, some F tier stuff.
Right.
And the chances of getting something that's maybe even B tier are pretty slim.
Right.
So yeah, I'm going to rank this one pretty low. Maybe I'll put it in the same tier as what was that? The Bujinkan, the ninjas.
So what elevates it for you above Aikido and Capoeira?
Well, because there are enough people out there who actually spar at least a little bit.
Okay.
But then again, there are probably plenty of Japanese jiu-jitsu gyms where they don't spar at all, and they probably just dress up and cosplay as 18th century bathhouse attendants in Japan.
Right.
And yeah, man. But from my personal experience there was sparring. One gym was good, one gym was meh. So I would say there's the possibility of finding a good gym and probability of finding a bad one. So
gotcha.
I'll give it, what, a D minus?
D. This is the D.
Okay, a D.
Okay.
Sure.
We can always change it. So, okay, the next one is going to be a controversial one and an interesting one. So it's Gracie Jiu Jitsu. So the way
Okay, so we're separating BJJ and Gracie Jiu Jitsu? Okay.
Yeah, this is interesting for me to do because Gracie Jiu Jitsu usually from what I see, it promotes itself as the self-defense version of Brazilian
Oh, you mean
Jiu-Jitsu.
like Henner and Huron specifically?
Yeah, and also like the going a little bit back as well with Helios, Gracie's, self-defense stuff. It was passed on, but essentially, yeah, we're talking about that, where it is said and promoted that from day one they do focus on the self-defense aspect. There are even some knife defense techniques. Now, the knife defense techniques, again, I haven't tried it. This is opinion-based, observation-based, but didn't look great. The knife defense, I was pretty much
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
right. It
Where they're using a stick as a knife and they're out on the beach and they're doing some goofy stuff, and I'm looking at this like, oh man, you're gonna get cut doing that, dude.
Yeah,
you're gonna get cut.
That did not look great. But I guess I think they are teaching you to defend against strikes. Now, the baffling part for me, which I kind of understand why they wouldn't do it, but Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is famous for pressure testing and rolling, even to its downfall to some degree, where you said a new person comes in and it's like, just roll. And that's not a great way to go, but still the rolling, all in all, it's a great thing. Now, it's interesting for me that it seems that in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, the self-defense element is separated. It's like, oh, here's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and here's we roll, and here we do static, cooperative, knife defense, and striking training. Like it's like, why not add the pressure testing into that, at least at a light degree? And I never saw that being done. Maybe it's being done, but I never seen it, so it doesn't seem like it's a big integral part. So that's the baffling part, that it's being separated. The self-defense element is cooperative, which is more akin to like Aikido and Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. But still, I think they do teach the theory of avoiding, deterring, and there is some knowledge you get about defending against strikes. So I guess I would imagine it's superior to just a regular BJJ gym in terms of regular woman training for a year and learning self-defense, because there's no focus.
I'm going to have to clarify here, because Gracie Jiu Jitsu can mean a few different things.
Right.
Like if we're specifically talking about Gracie University Online or Gracie Jiu Jitsu Online, Henner and Hiron's system, that's one thing. There are a whole bunch of Gracies, and there are a whole bunch of jiu-jitsu gyms that go under the banner of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, which are nothing like what Henner and Hiron are doing.
Sure, very good point.
So I just want to clarify that. Are we talking about like Gracie University Online?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's make it clear.
Okay. This is an interesting business model, and over the years I've been very critical of it, especially at the beginning. I think they got better over time at their business model. Obviously, everybody does. If you do it long enough, you iron out some of the kinks. But their business model, as far as I understand it right now, they are essentially franchising opportunities to individuals to open up garage gyms across America, across the world. And they can earn like a Gracie Combatives belt. They used to give out blue belts, even originally, not anymore, but originally they advertised you can level up to black belt on the internet, and everybody was like, "Whoa, say what now?" Anyway, they don't do that anymore.
Okay.
I know some people are going to be like, "I haven't heard about that." Yes, it's true. It was on the internet back in the day. Everybody was mad about it.
Okay.
So essentially they're offering online instruction to a bunch of people who are training by themselves with their friends in their garages. They get some mats down on the floor. They roll. They follow the videos that the Gracies send them. And how effective is it? I've seen the videos. I've seen what they teach. It's not terrible. It's not bad information. Most of it, like that knife fighting stuff, that'll get you killed. But most of it is just basic fundamental movement. Somebody's mounting you. How do you do an upa and get out of there? How do you bridge and roll, that sort of thing? Yeah. How do you trap an arm? Somebody's putting a two-handed rape choke on you from the top. What do you do about that? Some really basic positional things that people should know. And this is good information. And they're not going to waste your time with, let's do this crazy sweep from the deep half guard that you will probably never use in a real life situation, but it'll come in really handy in this very specific scenario in a grappling tournament. Okay, so that they're not going to teach you that stuff. So as far as being streamlined, teaching good information for 1 year, they're going to give you good information. But I'm going to question the system, of the system. Now, if you're going to say their gym in Torrance, California, and training with Henry and Hiron themselves, then obviously they're going to make sure you have a good time there and that you're getting correct information.
Yeah.
If you go to the average Gracie garage gym that say, oh, I don't know, some dude who got his combatives belt online set up, and he may or may not know the techniques to the infrastructure, a decent level of proficiency.
Yeah.
Are you going to have the same experience? Heck no, you're not.
Yeah.
Now, yeah, it's the quality control is the big issue with Gracie University Online. The information is good. The quality control is not.
Yeah.
And I know Henry and Hiron would disagree with me and say, no, we have all these checks and balances or whatever. But look, it is hard enough to do quality control when you are there in person in the gym, making sure everybody's on the same page.
Right.
If you've got thousands, tens of thousands, a million people around the world setting up gyms in your name and you can't supervise them in any meaningful way, there's no quality control there. There's just not.
Yeah.
So I'm going to rank this one lower than you. Again, the information is good.
Yeah.
If you master the information they teach in these videos,
yeah,
great. You'll be well prepared for many common self-defense situations. But the methodology, the way the information is distributed and taught and practiced, I'm going to rank it really low. So I'm going to give this one a C.
Okay. Yeah, because you're making a point, because I was focusing more on the system versus the delivery through the online means. When you take that into account, sure. I guess for me, it would have been balanced out between those two arguments, like that the system isn't bad, but the delivery is bad. Could be maybe a B- for me, but if we're focusing on the fact that there's no quality control, that's definitely a huge problem. Like if I would focus on that even more, I agree that would even go lower. But I guess C is a kind of balance between the two. So yeah, I see your point. Okay, cool.
Okay.
Next one. Now this one is, I think it goes into the questionable kind of realm, but I think many people get confused about it because it's Jeet Kune Do. And I think, the whole difficulty is because Bruce Lee, such a legend, I think you questioned, Bruce Lee.
It's Bruce Lee's martial art. How can you hate on it, bro?
Exactly. And then, and so many people think that Bruce Lee was invincible but even
if he was, if Bruce Lee was a demigod, even if he was untouchable, you are not Bruce Lee. People of the internet, you are not Bruce Lee.
Right. It's a good point. And to make it even worse for Jeet Kune Do, it's Bruce Lee and Jeet Kune Do is not one and the same. I have not trained Jeet Kune Do, so again, this is my knowledge is limited, but I have had many conversations with Matt Thornton, who's now a high-ranking Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu person, but he used to be an instructor in Jeet Kune Do. I was a part of many conversations between him and various Jeet Kune Do like super masters, like of course like famous and legendary. And I think the consensus still comes down to the fact that it's often cooperative. They're not like disregarding what doesn't work, which is supposed to be, the Jeet Kune Do thing. They're just taking everything and they seem to be often fascinated by the non-working stuff. Like we're going to come to Kali later, but like the knife fighting where you're not even trying to touch each other and you're fighting in midair, stuff like that. They're super fascinated about that. So things are not so great there, and sparring seems to be very rare from what I
Yeah,
gather.
look, man, every Jeet Kune Do instructor hates the last page of the Tao of Jeet Kune Do.
What is it?
On the last page, there's a note from Bruce Lee where he's talking about styles of martial arts and so on. And he says, look, and I'm paraphrasing. I have the book right over there. I could go and read it, but I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
If anybody tells you Jeet Kune Do is this or Jeet Kune Do is that, then Jeet Kune Do is dead. Because that's not what it is. Jeet Kune Do is what I do. Go do your own thing, basically, is what he's telling you.
Shoot.
So as far as I understand what Bruce Lee meant and what he expressed through all his notes that you can read in the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, it's his philosophy on fighting. He's saying, go find your own way.
Right.
And so when people say, I train in Jeet Kune Do, I have a Jeet Kune Do school, I'm a Jeet Kune Do instructor. So it's always been puzzling to me how there are so many Jeet Kune Do schools, Jeet Kune Do instructors, Jeet Kune Do stylists, when Bruce Lee was very outspoken about how it's not a style, it's my philosophy. Right. So if we understand Jeet Kune Do as a philosophy versus a style, anyway, we could debate about this all day, but let's consider the gyms who call themselves Jeet Kune Do gyms or Jeet Kune Do schools, and what training with them would offer the average woman within a year. My personal experience, most of those places are crap. Most of them are cash grabs, riding on the coattails of Bruce Lee's fame.
Yeah.
Because everybody knows and recognizes Bruce Lee. So many of these guys, not all of them, some of them are good. Like some of them know what they're doing. Eric Paulson, for example, right? Former MMA fighter. He's got black belts and everything, and he's a Jeet Kune Do certified instructor. He can teach you how to fight. He can teach you how to defend yourself. And there are guys like that. But the overwhelming majority of them are a bunch of clueless nerds who don't know how to teach hand-to-hand combat, let alone how to teach an unarmed, average woman how to defend herself from a potentially larger, stronger surprise attack from a larger, stronger person. Right. So there's a lot of theatricality about it, and they'll quote Bruce Lee. They'll say stuff, keep your lead hand in the lead because it's the hand that's going, or keep your power hand in the lead because it's going to do most of the work, which is a quote from Bruce Lee, which is why he did it. One of the reasons why he did it. But what they forget is why Bruce Lee did the things he did specifically for himself. Did you know Bruce Lee had 2 different lengths of legs? His left leg was shorter than his right leg.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know this. It was a little bit shorter than the right leg, which is why if you watch the stance he usually adopted, he would sit back on his left leg with his lead hand in the front. His right leg was longer. And so essentially that was biomechanically necessary for him to do to compensate for that difference. And so we have all these essentially Bruce Lee impersonators out there calling themselves Jeet Kune Do instructors, trying to essentially copy Bruce Lee's deformity, completely oblivious of why he even did the things that he did. Yeah. I mean, Bruce Lee was fighting that way because of his specific physiology. He was moving that way because of his limitations. And it is bizarre to me that people try to copy that as if that's going to give them some sort of advantage. No, Bruce Lee is telling people, look, you need to work with your own limitations. You need to develop your own style because of the way that your body works and the way your mind works. But yeah, man. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked about Bruce Lee's philosophy here because
it's a great rabbit hole.
It infuriates me. It infuriates me. But anyway, the average Jeet Kune Do gym, with the exception of the outliers like Eric Paulson and combat submission wrestling, those guys are fantastic. But the average, I would give an F. I just give a straight up F. Yeah. And I'll tell you why. The dishonesty, the disingenuousness of what they are practicing.
But I guess because to the most degree, I'm with you. Maybe I just haven't bumped into it as much to be as infuriated. But regarding F versus, so I'm gonna put it at F just for the moment. But regarding F,
I mean, we could say getting out there and training it all is better than not, which is kind of what we did for Aikido and you know, the ninja guys and
that's
so
what I was
on,
about to say, right?
but there's just so much dishonesty, so many McDojos, and so many charlatans.
But I guess
just propping themselves up under Bruce Lee's name. It's disgusting to me. I hate it. And
I can see that. Wow, you're like
yes.
me and Aikido with Jeet Kune Do.
Yes.
So, but let's say if we focus on the woman, and there's two women, and they're equally physically skilled and or whatever, like they're same woman, like twins, and one is not going to Jeet Kune Do, and the other one is going to Jeet Kune Do. Let's say like a fairly McDojo Jeet Kune Do. Would you say the one which goes?
Who's going to win in a fight?
Yeah, not a fight. We're not thinking about a fight.
I think probably a better comparison would be, we have the woman who goes to the average Aikido school versus the one who goes to the Jeet Kune Do McDojo. Who's going to fare better? That's a tough one. Because she's probably in the McDojo, she's probably going to learn some Wing Chun trapping. She's probably going to learn how to flick her right hand out in a quick back fist. She's probably going to be taught side kicks, and she's probably going to be preached at a lot about be like water. I don't know. But she's probably never going to spar. She's probably never going to experience pressure. And is she even going to have the benefit of knowing how to properly break fall?
No,
maybe not.
Yeah, I guess because for me, F, I'm cautious of F. I was cautious because for me, F sounds like nothing is as good as, it's like training nothing is as good as F. But I guess maybe F is, maybe there's an F minus, which we don't have. F minus means it's useless.
Rokas, it sounds like you really want to change my mind. All right, I'll give it an F plus.
F plus. Great.
I'll give it an F plus just because getting out there and training is better than nothing.
But I want to explain myself. It's not as much about me wanting to change your mind as much as it's like there's this internal conflict in me, like is it worse than nothing? But although at the same time there is an argument to be made, which to more than less I tend to stand by, is that Aikido, for example, I think, and maybe to the same point, Jeet Kune Do, but I know of Aikido because my background, that it could make you worse than better. It's like knowing nothing.
I would say some training methodologies are worse than nothing.
Exactly. And to explain my point, like I remember there's a story which explains that. I was training Aikido with my first instructor. Like I was really devoted. I was like training hardcore. I was asking people to like hold me tight and strike hard. And obviously I didn't realize that there was no aliveness, that they would strike hard and stop. So it was useless in that regard, but I was like training hard. And I had some other friends of my age who were doing the same thing. But we all, I think, I have a feeling and I have a belief that all Bullshido or McDojo practitioners, deep inside, they know that what they're practicing is not effective. Like they have a doubt. And I had a doubt. My friends had a doubt. But then, so we all had that doubt, which we try to annihilate by training more. But then one of my friends came to the Aikido class one day, and before the class, he said, "You know what? My friend was attacked the other day," and he was telling like it was this scrawny, tiny kid from his school, like doesn't look like a fighter or nothing at all, like like a geeky type of kid. And like a couple of guys stood in front of him and they wanted to rob him. And he said, and he just punched the guy. and just kind of like ran away or something. And that was it. And we were all like, damn, we're training Aikido for, couple years or like every day. And this guy trains nothing. And somebody attacked him and he punched and ran away. And that was the right response. Meanwhile, as I mentioned before, I was attacked by 5 guys. And if I would have not trained anything, I would have likely ran away or punched and ran away. But instead, because of my Aikido background, I stood there. I punched the guy because he grabbed me. I did no Aikido. I punched him. That was the instinct, which is crazy because grabbing apparently is, that was supposed to be like Aikido time. But I didn't run away because I was taught to look for an attack and use the energy against the opponent. So my point is, some martial arts can make you worse. And I don't know, maybe that's the case with Jeet Kune Do too. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, it depends entirely on what's being taught, and you will have a radically different experience from one Jeet Kune Do school to another, or any other martial art.
Yeah.
But yeah, just like you said, how is a martial art going to make you worse? Well, by teaching you the wrong response. Now,
right.
Worst case scenario in a lot of martial arts, you get attacked, you're just going to freeze because you don't know what to do because you've never experienced pressure, never experienced adversity, never been punched in the face. And so, your Krav Maga school teaches you just do this, and then you freeze and you're not able to do it. Worst case scenario. But the one you pointed out about being taught to essentially stand your ground, when the more intelligent option, man, I just sounded like Dale Brown there. Is he on this list? Anyway, the more intelligent option is to get out of there, right?
Right, yeah.
So, yeah, man.
So, I guess to wrap up Jeet Kune Do, F, at best F+, I'm okay with that. Let's punish Jeet Kune Do.
All the Jeet Kune Do guys are mad because they're like, how dare you put us lower than Aikido? Aikido sucks. I'm like, look in the mirror, guys. Look in the mirror.
And I'll also, maybe it's not entirely true, but I think the more it infuriates someone, the more there's a chance that something is wrong. Because I think if you're training a martial art which is completely functional, like let's say boxing does not pretend to be anything that it is not, at least from what I see. It doesn't tell you like you're going to become a self-defense expert. It's boxing is boxing, and it's effective in what it does. And if somebody's going to say to a boxer, oh, boxing is an F, I don't see a boxer being like,
they just laugh it off like, okay.
Like whatever.
I know what I can and can't do.
Exactly.
Whatever.
Exactly.
It's people who are insecure in their abilities who are going to get mad and be like, how dare you insult my deity? Because that's what these martial arts become to a lot of people, is their object of worship.
Right. So I think like that's an important thing to mention. Like if somebody gets infuriated by the points we made, probably, as you said, it's worth looking at the mirror. So yeah. Okay. Big one, Judo.
Judo, okay.
Yes, to start off, I experienced some Judo lately. I investigated Judo. I'm still brand new, but I see a lot of potential. I imagine that it can actually have some potential of smaller person dealing with a bigger opponent. I also imagine that it takes a while to learn Judo. Like the few classes I went to, did not learn much. So I think that's
same with wrestling. It's going to take you like 3 or 4 years before you start to get a handle on things.
So that's
for most people.
So that already, because I would have wanted to rank it higher, but focusing on that point, regular woman training for a year, okay, that's a problem. Pros, I imagine as well, I'd say is like learning to deal with grips. That's great for self-defense. Women will most likely be grabbed not only on hands or arms, but also by clothes. So that could be cool, but the fact that probably it'll take a while to learn.
Well, all good martial arts do. Yeah.
True. But I
But
guess.
how good are you going to be at judo after you're in a self-defense situation? Yeah, man, that's a good question.
I'll
Do you want to
just,
rank this first, or do you want me
yeah,
to?
I'll throw it out there. I'll see. What about you?
Okay. You know, I think that's fair. Let me talk myself through this, though.
Yeah, sure.
Judo, as far as an advanced judo player, is great, like phenomenal at self-defense. And take my friend Leo, for example. He's a phenomenal judo black belt. If he gets a hold of your sleeve and your collar or your pant leg, you will be on the ground. You just will. And he'll be able to dominate you. That being said, the average woman after 1 year will not be at that level. They won't. So what level will you be at after 1 year in judo? I'll tell you where I was. And this was as a person with multiple experiences in other martial arts for a number of years. After 1 year, I wasn't very good at judo. I don't think I could hit anybody with the Uchimata after 1 year. I definitely couldn't hit a Ogoshi or a Hare Goshi or any of those after 1 year.
Yeah.
After about 3 or 4, yeah, I could make some of that stuff work. But after 1 year, no. Now, what do you get after 1 year? You get the experience, like we talked about with Aikido, of break falling. But I would say to a better degree, a good judo school is going to teach you tumbling. It's going to teach you how to fall, how to get thrown forcefully to the ground and not die.
Yeah.
Not just how to, take a fall gracefully when somebody's doing a wrist lock on you, but how to take a full force throw intended to knock somebody out and break fall and not get hurt. You will learn that within a year. You will learn how to take falls in a year. Like, even if you don't learn how to win in judo, you will learn how to not lose. And that's a very important distinction.
Yeah.
This is something Elio Gracie talked about. He said, switching gears to BJJ, but he said, I don't fight to win. I fight to not lose.
It's interesting.
And if you watch the way he actually fought in Vale Tudo matches, he spent like a half hour on his back in side control. Like, he got dominated for a pretty long time. And he lost some of his matches, famously against Kimura, for example. But he had a different sort of mindset, which was, I fight to not lose. So within a year, you will become a lot tougher than you would have otherwise. So, and also I think you'll become very realistic in your expectations about fighting a bigger, stronger opponent. And just some advice for women going to martial arts classes for self-defense: spar with everybody. Spar with the women, which is what most women do. They want to feel comfortable. They don't want somebody they feel is going to ragdoll them and beat them up. But spar with men. Spar with men who are larger than you. Yeah. Right? Because that's going to give you a radically different experience if your goal is self-defense. Right. Okay, that is something that you need. You need to know what it is like to be overpowered, to be on the losing end of things, and still be able to fight to not lose, if you will. Right. And judo teaches you this right away, early and often. So at the same time, if you're on your back, simply not getting knocked out right away. I mean, you could use judo in that situation, for example, to pull guard and tie the guy up. You might not submit him or anything like that, but you could tie him up until hopefully help arrives. So that's way better than many of the martial arts on this list. I think C is fair. Maybe C+.
C+, yeah. I like that. Yeah, because C, I'm like, it kind of feels fair, but it also doesn't feel like entirely great. So C+, yeah. I like that.
I know a lot of judo purists will get mad at me. Not every judo school is the same. Some judo schools suck. We can say this about every martial art, but essentially every technique from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is technically in the syllabus of judo. However, they are not practiced with the same frequency.
Yeah.
Many judo schools never practice the ground game at all. Some practice quite a bit. Some guys are killers on the floor, and a lot of them are not. So the average woman at the average judo school is going to learn how to fall and how to try to survive once they get to the floor, I'm guessing.
C+. Sounds great. Next one, Kali Eskrima Arnis. That's what's written. So Filipino martial arts, I guess.
Filipino stick fighting, yeah.
Yeah. Now I have very little. I have no experience with it. I even haven't did a deep dive into it, because with some martial arts I just investigated and looked at examples and analyzed, because that's part of my job these days. So I only have this kind of, that's how it looks like. So I'm not going to talk for long. I have doubts because I don't, from the examples I saw and from the stories I heard, I don't hear many stories of pressure testing. I think it's usually like flow drills, mid-air. So yeah, it just does not seem.
I'm laughing because my friend Nils, who plays Captain Krav Maga in my comedy videos, he's a big practitioner of Kali, Arnis, Eskrima, these sorts of things. He does stick fighting, and they spar. So he would always come to class with like big bruises and welts on his arm. I'm like, oh, is that from Kali? He'd be like, yep, and he'd show me the videos, and they go at it. I mean, they wear like fencing helmets and gloves, and that's it. And then they just hit each other. So you can practice that live, and it is a different experience if you're getting hit in the head without a helmet and with a helmet. That's radically different. But yeah, you were saying?
No, yeah, I just want to say, if that's the case, then I'd be like, holy crap, this is great, because for self-defense, and especially if we're looking at a regular woman, let's say a bigger man attacking, improvised weapon or a weapon is probably one of the best solutions to kind of narrow down the gap of the physical.
Yeah, they have the right advice. They have the right idea about self-defense. Get a weapon,
right?
Preferably one in each hand, and use it as best as you can. That being said, how many women carry around a couple of sticks with them on a regular basis, just in their day-to-day lives? Probably something like zero, I'm guessing. Unless they're hardcore Kali practitioners.
Also, I guess, and there's also that question of taking those out. I think some self-defense experts pointed that out to me, that carrying pepper spray, for example, is not already like making you safe, because in a stressful situation, you don't know if you're gonna be able to, unless you practice it, if you're gonna be able to find it in your bag, and So the same with sticks. It's like, where do you keep them?
Yeah, any weapon has to be easily available, and you have to practice with it in a variety of situations.
Right.
Like a lot of people say, just get a gun.
Right.
If you're just going to get a gun, you got to do a lot more than just get one. You've got to understand firearm safety. You've got to know how to aim the thing, how to shoot it, how to get it. Right? Is it available? Yeah. Can you pull it out within the time before the assailant gets to you? I mean, this is a big issue. There are tons of videos online on YouTube you can watch right now with just testing the time it takes to get the gun out of the holster and trained on the other guy before he can get you with the knife or something like this. And the results are kind of shocking. Yeah. So it's not enough to just get the weapon, right? 100%. It has to be easily accessible. It has to be on your person, and you have to have a lot of experience using it under pressure. It's not the same as like shooting a target that's just stationary, right? And I'm talking about guns, but you can say the same thing about Kali sticks or knives or whatever the weapon is that you're using. So again, Kali has the right idea: get a weapon and use it. And you can argue, well, you can. Bad guy could take the weapon away. Well, yeah, and if you're unarmed, bad guy could also take your life away too. Sure, right? A weapon is simply something that it's a force amplifier, is what that is. So the average woman, I've trained a lot of women over the years. The average woman is pretty bad at hurting people with her fists, to be honest. Sure. The average woman, most women, after about a year of training, are not very good at hurting people with their fists. Some of them have some nasty elbows. And so, we're going to get into Muay Thai in a bit,
Yeah.
which I'm probably going to talk about quite a bit.
Uh-huh.
But with their fists, a lot of them are just absolute crap.
Mm.
Okay. A weapon, a simple stick in your hand, on the other hand, this changes the equation dramatically. A woman with a stick, oh man, I'm having flashbacks about my mom beating me with a stick as a child. It was a thing back then, man. It was a thing. A woman with a stick is a dangerous woman, man. So
I like that phrase. That's a good quote. But I just wanted to double check because I had the impression that not all Filipino martial arts schools do actual sparring, and I was under the impression that it's
a lot of them don't. Yeah.
Okay, so but do a lot of them do? Like, is
and
it
out of
like
those who do, how many average women would be willing to stick fight and show up to work with welts all over their body and have to explain to people, oh no, it's from the gym. My boyfriend isn't beating me. Yeah, it's
damn.
A lot of women don't want to have that conversation.
Right. So many pros and cons. I guess I would have went lower, but after hearing you speak, especially that if let's say, I guess if we're talking about a school which does the pressure testing, does sparring, C minus. It's a hard one for me though. I don't know. What do you say?
You know, in an ideal situation, if this woman constantly had the weapons on her at all times and they were easily accessible, I would rank it pretty high. However, most self-defense weapons are fantasy wish fulfillment.
Yeah.
For the simple reason you're not going to have them.
Right.
Most of them.
Right.
The overwhelming majority. So yeah, I think if they spar, okay, great. If you get attacked out in the forest where there are a bunch of sticks lying around, great. You might be able to get an improvised weapon, but under most circumstances, most people live in major metropolitan areas on this planet. It's just the way the human population works. You're not going to find a stick.
See, what about you? Like final point. Is it C minus for you or?
Let's see. Which other martial arts did we rank at C minus?
No one, nothing. So that's the thing.
No one.
Yeah, that's the first C minus, because otherwise C is Gracie Jiu Jitsu and Judo, D is Bujinkan and Japanese Jiu Jitsu. So it's between those two.
Yeah, this is a tough one because part of me says, in theory, C minus is a good grade. But again, there's the whole idea of you're not going to have the sticks on you.
Yeah.
You're not.
Yeah.
And, some Filipino martial arts also teach some hand-to-hand stuff, but people go there for the stick fighting. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
They do. So
D?
Yeah, let's go with D.
Okay. I think it's like D plus. Oh, sorry. I mean, yeah, D plus. Yeah. I think no, because they do.
You probably think I'm pretty pessimistic about rating most of these martial arts low, even the good ones, right?
Right.
It's just because, quite frankly, most martial arts in general, are not a good response to self-defense. It's not a good answer to the self-defense question.
I agree 100%. And also, too, we're talking about a potentially life or death matter. So I think it's important to realistically look at it, because I'm okay with going lower than higher, because we want to bring realistic expectations versus like, oh, let's give this an S, and some woman watches this and they're like, oh, this is gonna make me super invincible. And yeah, we don't want to give that impression. So I'm with you. Next one it's a tricky one because there's so many styles. That's why I separated one single one, and I don't know if we should do that or not. But the next one is karate. So that's the trouble, because karate is karate.
Yeah, there are like 400 karate styles, but honestly, they're all very similar. They have very similar methodology.
Right.
So if we're talking about Shotokan or Kyokushin or Shotokai or whatever, right?
Right.
It's similar teaching methods. You go to a dojo, you wear the uniform, you bow, you do the forms. Sometimes you'll spar, sometimes you won't. Sometimes they'll practice kobudo with the weapons on the side. Yeah. But a lot of it's ceremonial. A lot of it is done simply for tradition. Yeah. But for the most part, karate is karate.
I wanna, because for some reason I'm being attracted to the C minus right now, because I would want to rank it above Bujinkan and Japanese Jitsu, because there is some distance management, footwork. Um, there's some level of sparring which that distance management can be
Depends on the
useful.
school, man.
Sorry?
A huge percentage of karate schools never spar. Ever.
That's bad.
I've trained in a lot of different karate dojos, and only one of them sparred.
Shoot.
Only one. Yeah. And I know there are some phenomenal combat sports athletes, Wonderboy Thompson, Lyoto Machida, these UFC fighters with karate backgrounds. And it gives people kind of a false impression of the overall scope of how karate is trained.
Yeah.
Because I would say there are probably more McDojos under the banner of karate than any other word we could apply to a martial art.
Yeah.
And I know Sensei Seth is seething right now, because he always talks about like Taekwondo being the safe space karate. I'm like, at least in Taekwondo you spar.
Right.
It's a very limited style of sparring. You can't punch the head. You can kick the head. It's a knockout sport. But at least in Taekwondo, you spar.
Yeah.
That's not true of all karate styles. There are some legit badasses in karate. But the overwhelming majority, are they that? No. Heck no. In fact, the overwhelming majority of karate schools I've visited, they do the forms, they bow, they put on the uniform, they cosplay as a martial artist, and then they go home feeling good about themselves.
Right.
They never spar, they never learn how to fight.
Well, to your point, the karate people I met, obviously there are some exceptions, but generally they don't appear tough. And obviously appearance is not everything, but I mean, just through the training and the way they present themselves, and even like actually appearing tough to some degree. This may be like a controversial statement, but I think it's a pretty good self-defense tactic as well. I'm not saying like,
it
pretend
matters.
Like hardcore.
It matters a great degree, man.
Right.
I had a friend who was a professional bodyguard. He bodyguarded for some big names like Tiger Woods and Paris Hilton. And I asked him a lot of questions, because I trained with the guy, and I asked him a lot of questions about the bodyguarding industry, like what kind of like hand-to-hand combat situations happen. He's like, look, it's mostly a visual deterrent. Like, he was a big dude.
Right.
Most of his time training was spent bodybuilding, essentially, to get the big scary looking gym muscles, because that's what people respect. If you have a 300-pound hunk of muscle standing behind you as a bodyguard, people they're not going to mess with you.
Yeah.
Even if that guy doesn't know how to fight at all. If you have, I don't know, the world's best Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt, but he's a flyweight, he's not going to be a good bodyguard. He's just not.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Well, what about a
visual
woman?
deterrents matter?
What about a woman though? Like, do you think?
That's a good question, because most women don't want to look scary. They want to look beautiful. They want to look feminine. Most women.
That too, but I wonder, I guess because I'm just thinking out loud, because I actually didn't think about it before. I guess a woman can look scary, like some like MMA fighter ladies. They're like, you can see they're tough. They're kind of almost like masculine, but those are again exceptions.
Yeah, it's the exception, not the norm. The average woman, after a year of training, is not going to go out and shave her head into a mohawk and get tattoos on her face. But what the average woman can do as a visual deterrent is get a big dog, like a Rottweiler or something like that. Man, that goes a long way. In fact, a big dog might be a better self-defense system than most of the martial arts on this list, to be honest.
What about body language? What do you think? Like, let's say, because I think it's a fair point that martial arts give you confidence, and that confidence maybe is not always as realistic, but it can present that confidence, can present an image like for somebody who's like, oh man, okay, I don't want to attack this person. I want to attack that person because that person is shy. And, so do you think that applies for
body language? Absolutely matters. 100%. Yeah.
Okay. But
When I was a child, I was bullied specifically because I had zero confidence. And I wasn't the smallest guy. There were smaller people. There were weaker people. There were probably targets that were physically easier to go after, but the bullies came after me largely because of the body language. I would hunch my shoulders. I wouldn't look people in the eye. I was really shy. And yeah, the bullies see that, okay, that's the guy. Let's go get him. He's not going to fight back. And they were right. And a lot of women fall into this situation. They are shy. They don't like conflict. And so, they'll often avoid eye contact with a big, scary looking guy. But if you are able to exude confidence and essentially communicate non-verbally in an honest way that you are not an easy target, okay, great. That's obviously preferable. Man, I forgot what martial art we were even talking about.
Karate. And the reason I brought it
up
because I think
karate is the confidence builder. Yes, it's the confidence building martial art.
I guess probably all of the martial arts can build confidence. It's just some of that is false confidence, which is not great. And maybe they're still internal doubt. My point before that was that karate sometimes the not all of the karate people I met are like that, but it's like they tended to be more kind of geeky, wimpy. Like they didn't have that vibe of I'm a fighter. They were more like
they're a bunch of nerds.
Yeah, I'm a nerd.
Which is exactly why I wanted to learn karate in the first place, because I was a nerd who got picked on, and I saw the Karate Kid when I was young, and I was like, "Where's my Mr. Miyagi?" Right? That's my solution.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's why nerds gravitate toward this stuff.
Right. So, but
karate it's a huge confidence booster when you can break a board for the first time. Oh man, your confidence goes through the roof. I just put my hand through a solid piece of wood. Whoa, I'm superhuman. That's amazing. I can do things normal people can't. Right. Even though it's not that hard to break a board, it's pretty easy, in fact.
Yeah.
But it's a huge boost in confidence. That matters. That does matter. It's not nothing.
So what's your score? Because I'm questioning my C- now after hearing your points. Would you downgrade karate to D with Bujinkan and Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, or keep it at C-?
Well, if we're going under the assumption that some random attacker just grabs a random lady without doing a thorough evaluation, throws her on the floor and starts attacking her, the average karate school isn't going to do much if the street thug looking for a woman to attack is gauging people's confidence. The woman with a karate black belt is probably going to carry herself differently than the average woman.
That is true, but obviously we need to fall back to 1 year.
Oh yes, 1 year. But did you know, at a lot of karate schools, you can get a black belt in a year? I kid you not.
Oh wow. Okay. Oh no. Oh, well, confidence booster, I guess.
You can buy a black belt, man. You can buy a black belt.
Okay. Okay, shocking moment, but I'm sure it's true. So
karate is not BJJ. You don't have to train for 20 years to get that belt, man.
Damn. So I don't know. Well, so C- or no?
I'm going to go with a D, to be honest. I'm going to go with a D just because I'm averaging all the karate schools I've experienced personally, and a lot of them were not places you would go to learn how to fight.
I'm okay with that. And then I had Kyokushin next by because it's more full contact, but does that make a difference?
I've trained and competed in Kyokushin as well, and it's different.
Yeah,
it's different. It's full contact. It's a different kind of fight. It's a mental toughness thing. You are striking the body. You can kick the head. You can knock the person out.
Yeah.
You can throw the guy and strike him on the ground. I believe it's one side. I don't remember what the current rule set is.
Yeah.
And so it breeds a type of mental toughness if you do that. But at the same time, how many women do Kyokushin Kumite? I haven't seen. I don't know any personally. They're There are some out there. I don't know them. They're the exception. They're not the norm. But even with 1 year of hardcore Kyokushin training, if we're talking about Kyokushin Karate,
yeah,
I'd rank it higher. Okay, yeah, that'll give you a lot of the same stress tests as boxing and so on.
So,
but
is that C minus or is that D plus? We don't have D plus, obviously. So
let's give it a C if we're averaging. If we're averaging all the great karate schools and all the crap ones.
C minus.
Let's give it a C. C minus.
Okay, great, cool. Okay, I'm glad I had Kyokushin there then. Okay, next one, big one, kickboxing. So
we got to be careful talking about kickboxing and women's self-defense, because a huge percentage of gyms that market themselves as kickboxing are cardio kickboxing.
Oh,
they're fitness classes.
No.
And I bring this up. It would seem like it would be a no-brainer. Taibo is not self-defense, but I get asked questions like this constantly, like on my YouTube channel, and I field everybody's questions as much as I can. Like, can I learn to defend myself doing Taibo? And the answer is no. You'll get super fit. It's great for you physically, but no, you're not going to learn how to fight. Kickboxing as a sport, as a combat sport.
Yeah, like K1 kickboxing. And I'll say a few words that I've been training lately. I focused lately on kickboxing, so I got familiar with it. Yeah, it's close to boxing in many ways. Obviously, you're spending half the time learning to kick and half the time learning to strike, so you're not going to become as good in a year at both as in boxing. You're just going to learn to strike.
After a year, most people kind of suck at kickboxing still.
You mean like they practice kickboxing, but they're not very good fighters in that kind of regard? Or
Yep.
I think you're right, because that's a personal journey of my own. Right now, I've started to delve into boxing because of that reason, because I felt that with kickboxing, I think I can get away with doing crappy stuff, probably because I can kick someone and open up them in that way. It's a long rabbit hole, but I think I have a feeling that with just pure boxing, I'll become a better fighter than just pure kickboxing. But anyway, that's more just general talk.
The great thing about boxing, it makes your kickboxing better. Boxing makes your Muay Thai better. Boxing even makes your Jiu Jitsu better, believe it or not.
Interesting. Okay.
It cross-contaminates everything in your mind as far as martial arts goes.
Oh, exciting, because I just started my boxing journey, so I got even more excited. But yeah, so coming back to a woman, when I was talking with Ice Mike about kickboxing, we were thinking about the importance of the teep, like that the teep in general, speaking about self-defense, the teep can push the person away. But if I'm thinking about an average woman, I don't think an average woman would necessarily master a teep in a year. And also, if kicking in self-defense in general, I don't think it's the go-to, because you can slip and you need to be really good at kicks. And yeah, I don't know. Part of me would want to put kickboxing at B minus, but the fact that after a year, you'd be.
That's interesting that you bring up the teep as like the failing to point the push kick. I would say, as far as most of the women I've trained, the push kick ended up being their strong point, the strong point of their game. Women generally have disproportionately strong lower bodies as opposed to men who tend to have disproportionately strong upper bodies.
Okay.
Not all. Some women are, they're women who are not athletic. You can throw them in the same boat as men who are not athletic. They're just going to suck at everything. But women with a basic athletic starting point, someone who is not sedentary. I think a lot of women have a proclivity to push things away. It is one of our most natural instincts. We have a few natural instincts against danger. One, to get away from the danger if we can. Like you see a spider, you move your body away from it, right? Somebody throws a punch at you, we flinch trying to get away from it. But at the same time, we bring something in between us and the danger. We try to push that danger away, either with our hands or if we train ourselves to do so with our feet, with our legs.
Yeah.
And so the teep can be a phenomenal tool for women's self-defense. I was teaching a kickboxing class just a few days ago, and there were some women, 4 women came. It was their first time training, and one of them had just absolutely phenomenal leg power.
Mm-hmm.
And she was just blasting the heavy bags around and holding pads for her, just blasting with enormous power and tremendous coordination. Her friend who came with her was not great. Not great. So which one is the average woman?
Yeah.
I would say neither were. The average
Right.
woman is somewhere in between.
Right. Yeah. So because coming back to that ranking, I was, after finishing my thought, I was closing into moving kickboxing from B- to C. Now that you said
Are we including Muay Thai and kickboxing, or are we doing Muay Thai separate?
No, Muay Thai is separate. Muay Thai is separate.
Okay.
Yeah,
As it should
thinking,
be.
Right. Yeah, I'm
As
thinking
kickboxing, we're talking about punching and kicking, basically.
right, exactly. Like K1 kickboxing, so pretty much no clinching, which no elbows.
If anybody doesn't know, there's a lot of grappling in Muay Thai.
Right, exactly.
Stand-up grappling.
So
It's like half the game.
So I'm between, because you just said that the push kick actually turns out can be a woman's weapon. I'm between B- and C. I don't know what do you, is it next to boxing and BJJ, or is it next to judo?
I would put it next to judo.
Okay, so
because a lot of the concepts, like, push people out of the way, how to punch and kick, and you're probably going to spar at some point, and so you will have that sort of pressure, but at the same time, you won't develop any of those skill sets, most likely to a high degree of proficiency.
Good point.
And with a lot of self-defense situations, if you're hitting somebody with a wimpy punch or a wimpy kick, and it's not damaging them, it's not pushing them away, it's not improving your position, you're often making the situation worse.
Okay.
I mean, think about it. If we're sparring, if you and I were boxing, and I hit you with a wimpy little jab, and it kind of stung a little bit, your first instinct would probably be, I'm going to hit you harder.
Yeah.
I'm going to get you with a jab that's actually good. Let me show you what I can do now. Right.
Yeah.
And that's in a friendly sparring session. Now imagine a guy with bad intentions. He comes to try to hurt a woman, and she hits him with a wimpy little punch or something like that. Now he's pissed off. Now he's like, now it's my turn.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is something we have to keep in mind in terms of a self-defense situation.
Yeah.
So for that reason, because you're probably not going to become a highly proficient striker within a year in kickboxing, and there's a lot it simply does not address. I mean, the floor is lava in kickboxing, for example. The clinch does not exist. Grabbing and holding doesn't exist. And all of these things will happen almost immediately in a self-defense situation. So I'll give it the
C.
What did we rank judo at? C? Okay.
C.
Yeah, let's give it a solid C.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. So now this one is going to be very interesting. Krav Maga.
Ooh. I've had a lot of bad experiences with Krav Maga.
So
many.
I did my share of research about Krav Maga, spoke to various experts, and obviously there's there's good examples and there's bad examples, but from what I see, usually tends to be bad examples. Issues with quality control, no pressure testing, techniques which just are not really efficient, taught in a cooperative setting. There's that whole philosophy, apparently, from what I've been told, that you are given the knowledge, like run away, use improvised weapons, so like check your environment. So that's valuable, and if the school teaches that, that's great. But it can also create the sense of false confidence, because you think you're a killer, but actually you're learning inefficient movement. So it's a hard one. I want to give it, for the theoretical part, I want to go higher. So let's say C-, but then for the confidence, I want to go lower, and for the false confidence builder element, so it's hard. So let's say I'll just drop it at D with karate and Japanese jiu-jitsu and Bujinkan, but I'll wait patiently for your answer.
All right, my instinct is to put this in the F tier. And
do tell.
All right. Two main experiences I've had with Krav Maga. One, just visiting a lot of Krav Maga schools and instructors, and seeing what they had to offer, and most of that was absolute crap. And these guys couldn't fight their ways out of a wet paper bag, and they were charlatans and McDojos, just bad, just really bad. The second, I had two former students from Israel who came to my gym. They were instructors of Krav Maga in the Israeli army.
Oh, shoot.
And when I talked to them about my experiences with all these bad Krav Maga schools, they looked confused and they said, wait a minute, Krav Maga is not self-defense. I said, what are you talking about? Everybody knows Krav Maga is self-defense. They're like, Krav Maga isn't self-defense. It's about aggression. I'm like, well, hold on. How do you teach Krav Maga in the army in Israel? And bear in mind, these guys are actual instructors in the IDF. Right. Okay. And so they explained the methodology. It's a basic 2-week hand-to-hand combatives course comparable to pretty much any nation's military. The US military has similar things going on, basic hand-to-hand combat things, because wars are not fought by hand-to-hand combat. They're not. So why do militaries invest resources into this in the off chance you might lose your weapon? Okay, sure. But the more important thing, to teach the soldiers to go toward the danger instead of run away from it. That was the primary objective of a Krav Maga instructor in the Israeli army, to teach soldiers to go toward danger instead of run away from it. Yeah. That's literally the polar opposite of self-defense. Right. Self-defense is get away from the danger, stop that danger from getting to, protect yourself, ensure your survival. Whereas the priority of a soldier in warfare is self-sacrifice for the greater good. To put yourself in danger in order to win the battle. Yeah. So I said, well, how do you practice that? What do you actually do? What are your practices like? They said, well, we put a guy against a couple of other guys who are allowed to punch and kick him, and he's not allowed to block anything. I'm like, huh. Oh, okay. Wow, that sounds terrible for self-defense. I'm like, and they said, well, it's because it's not self-defense. We're teaching you to go toward the danger, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's difficult, even when it's hurting you, and not run away from it. So a lot of people say, well, real military Krav Maga will teach you to defend yourself on the streets. No, real military Krav Maga will teach you to be a good soldier and go do your duty. Okay. However, the self-defense Krav Maga schools out there, the overwhelming majority I've seen are just absolute garbage. So in either of these respects, whether we're talking about the military Krav Maga, which is not self-defense, and it's not meant to be, I put that in the F tier for self-defense because it's not. It's just not. And the civilian self-defense strip mall McDojo style, also F. Because from my experience, it just sucked. Absolutely sucked. So I'm sure there are exceptions, but I haven't experienced them.
Always. But so no benefit for the lip service of do this, don't do that. I don't know if they even really do it, but.
And I've seen so many Krav Maga instructors give dangerous advice. Okay. We were talking about counterproductive martial arts. Oh my goodness. So there was this Krav Maga instructor, he pulls out some rubber knives and he is telling the students, all right, go attack that guy with the knife and take the knife away from him. Do what you would do in real life. And this one guy is like, do what I would do in real life? Okay. So the student starts running, screaming, help, there's a maniac with a knife, police, help. And he's just sprinting out of there. And the Krav Maga instructor is like, no, get back in there, fight him. He's like, but I wouldn't do that in real life. That's suicide. He has a knife. I don't.
Right.
And the instructor's like, no, you have to learn this. And so he's instilling bad habits, like go toward the knife wielding maniac.
Yeah.
That's a terrible thing to teach.
That does.
And then when he actually starts teaching technique about how to disarm the guy, it's the most nonsensical crap. When he finally hands me the knife and says, all right, stab me if you can. Oh, I cut him up like 50 times, slit his throat. And the dude gets mad. He gets so mad. He's like, you can't do this. And I just broke his paradigm. It's a rubber knife. He's not injured. His pride is destroyed, though.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm not a knife fighting specialist. I'm not a stranger to it. I know how to handle the weapon, but I'm not a specialist by any stretch of the imagination. This guy is telling the world I'm a specialist, and I'm kicking his butt. This should not be happening.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, I would say most knife fighting gurus, anybody who brings a knife into the equation is probably lying to you.
Right. Well, you made some good explanations and justifications. So Krav Maga, F. I'm okay with that. So we have another big one: mixed martial arts. There's this thing called mixed martial arts. So I'm seeing two sides, because on one side you're learning grappling and striking, and you're sparring.
Yeah, you're having all the important tools thrown at you, right?
Right, and that's
we're dealing with the average woman in 1 year.
Exactly. So because if it's just that first element, it's great. That's awesome. If a woman goes for a year to a mixed martial arts gym, she learns a little bit of everything. Probably not a lot of something.
There was a woman I trained every morning, did a private lesson 5 or 6 times a week for about 2 years. Within the 1 year mark, I would be very confident with her defending herself in many hand-to-hand combat situations. She became a proficient fighter, but this woman was the exception, not the norm. She was extremely talented, highly athletic, and very, very dedicated. Again, we're talking about daily training, you know, private training, group classes on top of that, daily.
Damn.
I don't think when we say train for a year, we're probably saying like attend a group class 2-3 times a week.
3 times a week.
Something like that.
Right. Yeah.
So how good are you going to get at mixed martial arts 2 to 3 times a week in a year? Well, I've seen this. I've seen this firsthand many, many times. How many people got good within a year? How many people didn't? And what the average probably is. The average within a year is, it's average. It's very average. Okay. So, and once again, just because the gym says MMA on it doesn't mean it's any good. This is true with every martial art. I cannot stress this message enough. You're probably going to have to edit this out because I've said it so many times, but it's incredibly true. And anybody watching this video trying to pick a martial art for self-defense needs to understand this. The label is not you. Okay, going back to what Bruce Lee taught, the label is not you. Okay, the label might help build confidence, but it's not what is going to fight for you. Okay. So if you were coming to, say, my gym, I've got faith in my system. I've got faith in my teaching. If you're coming to my gym to learn MMA, learn the sport of MMA for a year, if you are consistent, okay, you train MMA with me 2-3 times a week, 2-hour sessions, you'll have a decent skill set, but at the same time, will you have the skill set that you need to defend yourself against, say, a larger, stronger attacker who takes you by surprise? Not necessarily, because that's not what we're training for. That's not the scenario.
Right.
My job, and I'm very honest and transparent about this, I'm not a self-defense instructor. I'm a combat sports coach, and I train fighters to win cage fights.
Right.
That's my job. And a lot of people, again, they have trouble distinguishing between the two, but it is the polar opposite. Similar to the military Krav Maga aspect of go toward the danger, that's what a combat sport is. You must train yourself to not just go toward the danger, but to become the danger. Okay. To become the thing the other person wants to run away from, the thing the other person wants to submit to. Okay. And this is a skill set that you're probably not going to get within a year.
Right.
But it's also a skill set that is, in many cases, too much, and in other cases, too little for a self-defense situation. For example, let's say a woman does manage to get the upper hand, and she's a well-rounded MMA fighter, and I don't know, she gets the bad guy in a rear naked choke, maybe hits him a few times and gets him in the rear naked choke and strangles him unconscious. Okay, great. But what if she is in a state like, say, the state of Utah in the US, where using a strangulation technique is a felony?
No.
Okay. Remember, self-defense is a legal term. That's the first thing I said in this this discussion. Self-defense is a legal term. It's not a set of martial arts movements or combative techniques. It's a legal term to justify violent action that would otherwise be illegal. Okay. Now, what if you get the other hand and you start beating the other guy to a pulp? You ground him, pound him, or you get in full mount and you just beat him senseless. And now he's got multiple skull fractures, and he's missing an eye, and he's missing his teeth. And then he lawyers up and gets better lawyers than you. And okay, that's a different situation. In some situations, MMA is just way too much for self-defense. And in others, it's not enough. What if the guy brings a knife? Okay. And you have trained yourself to go toward the danger and convince yourself, I am going to be victorious in this fight. Maybe you can do it. There's a high probability you can't. And in that situation, MMA is not going to be enough. So we have to be brutally honest with ourselves about that. So, you know, there's a lot of great stuff you will learn as a mixed martial artist you can use in a self-defense situation. But the fighter's mentality is the wrong mentality in many ways for a self-defense situation. So because of that, I'm going to rank it probably equal with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and boxing. Where do we put that? Like a B?
Oh, okay. Because so now B- is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, boxing, and wrestling.
Yeah, B-.
Okay, because I was almost thinking, because of the fact that over a year, an average woman would have trouble mastering any of the aspects. So I was debating with myself whether I would go with a C. Like for kickboxing, we put kickboxing at C because, you know, it separates kicking and punching, and so you're not becoming good at either of those. So would you still keeping that in mind, would you still go for B- for mixed martial arts versus?
It depends on what you are considering a MMA gym, because a lot of MMA gyms don't actually teach the sport of MMA. They teach a jiu-jitsu class, and they teach a Muay Thai class, and they teach a boxing class, and maybe they run some other fitness class or something like that. That's a very common model.
Yeah.
That's not MMA training. MMA training is it's a very streamlined approach to the sport of mixed martial arts.
Okay.
So quite frankly, most MMA gyms who call themselves MMA gyms absolutely suck at teaching MMA, because they don't teach the sport of MMA. They teach different sports. Right. It would be like saying, hey, I want to become a basketball player, and so I'm going to go train in soccer and ping pong and baseball. Yeah. Great. And with those three skill sets combined, I'll be a good basketball player. There will be some athletic crossover. You'll learn to run around and get coordinated and all this stuff, but you won't be a good basketball player. But that's exactly what's happening with a huge percentage of so-called MMA gyms. They don't teach the sport of MMA. If you use a streamlined approach, and man, I'm pretty confident in my ability within 1 year to create a fairly competent fighter out of somebody who knows nothing about martial arts. I'm fairly confident in my ability to do that. I would say a huge percentage of people who call themselves coaches have never even tried to do that in their lives. They've never tried to teach the sport of MMA. Man, even the UFC gets this wrong in many aspects. I hate to say this, but I visited the Performance Institute, and they've got their whole staff. They got the boxing coach and the wrestling coach and the strength and conditioning guy, and they got the main guy who supervises everything. And it's not the worst model. It's good to have this system of checks and balances, but it's also a flawed model of training MMA fighters for different sports besides MMA, and then expecting them to perform optimally in the cage. It's weird, man. It's kind of dumb, to be honest, but it's what almost everybody does, with a few exceptions. Like this guy. Blowing my own horn here a little bit, but it needs to be said. There are just a lot of great martial arts that are trained stupidly. So again, the way I'm judging this is, if I'm training this woman as her MMA coach within 1 year, I would give it the what was it, the B minus?
B minus.
And people are like, is that because you're not confident in yourself as a coach? No, it's because I'm brutally honest about what MMA is and what it's not. Okay. So even if I can train a competent MMA fighter within 1 year, who's able to win a fight against another woman who trains MMA for a year and win fights consistently at that level, I'm not confident in her ability to translate that into the self-defense situation we've outlined.
Okay, yeah, I'm with that. So the one we spoke about before and kept saying, oh, we're going to speak about that later, is Muay Thai.
Okay,
so that's an interesting one, because I'll say a few things to get started.
Sure.
I think Muay Thai is pretty lethal with elbows, and you mentioned women apparently are pretty good with elbows, and I think elbows also too. And it's not like elbows, but that's the first thing I wanted to kind of bring up. I think you mentioned before that striking with the fist, that's dangerous for the fist, because it's bare knuckle and we're training in boxing with gloves. But an elbow...
Yeah, and after 1 year of training, you're probably not going to be good at bare knuckle fighting.
Right. But I guess an elbow can be used as a weapon, and...
An elbow can be dangerous right away.
Right.
And
exactly.
you don't have to smash it in with a great deal of power either. You can graze the guy over the eye and make him bleed into his eyes and blind him.
Right.
And even a small woman, and a lot of small women have deadly elbows. Right. A lot of women look at their elbows and they're like, oh, they're all pointy and ugly, I don't like them. And I look at them and like, oh, those are great fighting elbows. That's a gift. That's a genetic gift. And they start looking at their elbows different, like, oh, wow, that's a good thing. I didn't know that. I love it.
Right.
Wow. Right. So
that's really encouraging already. And also then there's the clinch. You're learning some grappling skills, which is essential for a self-defense situation. There's the teep kick is there as well. It's not, as I speak through it, obviously there are flaws as well, but most of the flaws we covered in general about other martial arts.
Yeah, the flaws, the time frame it's going to take to develop the skill set.
Right. Yeah.
So the skill set is excellent. It's amazing. Again, the ground is lava in Muay Thai, so you're not going to learn how to stuff a takedown or anything like that, or even get back up if you're down. But as far as stand-up fighting, it's an amazing skill set. That being said, it's an amazing skill set that takes a long time to develop. Right. I'll tell you a little story about one of my Muay Thai coaches, a guy named Rock Chanon Sinsub. He was a Lumpini boxing stadium champion. Just to throw a label out there, he knew what he was doing, is what I'm trying to say. He had really good kicks, just thunderous, powerful kicks, like no one I had ever met until before in my life at that point. And I asked him, how do you throw your kicks like that? And I'm expecting a technical answer. I'm expecting him to say, oh, all you need to do is twist your hips differently, then you'll be able to kick this hard today. And he said, from 5 years old to 10 years old, every day from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., kick the bags. And then he starts kicking the bag. From 8 a.m. to 9 a.m., kick the pads. From 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., play in the ring. He means sparring in the ring. Yeah. After 5 years, then good kick.
Oh, that's simple. Huh?
His exact words, yes. Like, oh, 5 years of daily training, 3 hours just to develop that kick. Not to mention all the other tools of Muay Thai.
Yeah.
And this guy, Rock, he was an amazing clinch fighter. He was like one of the best Muay Thai clinch fighters I'd ever met. People would like fly in from Japan to train with this guy for K1 fights. And clinching isn't a huge part of K1.
Yeah, no.
Under K1 rules, you can clinch very briefly. It has to be active. You can land one knee and you have to let go immediately.
Yeah.
Like there's no inactive clinching, no stalling. But his clinch game was so good. People would fly in from Japan just to get that little edge for that little moment in the clinch in their sport. But man, it takes a long time. And I would say the average woman, after 1 year of clinch fighting training, is going to get manhandled by the average man. I'm working under the assumption that this is going to be a larger, stronger person because bullies look for smaller targets, smaller, weaker targets. So the elbows, the knees, these are powerful tools. You don't need gloves to use. It's going to teach you infighting. It's going to get you comfortable being uncomfortable with somebody grabbing you, because a lot of women are not comfortable with that. I would say most women are not comfortable with a stranger grabbing you. If you are comfortable with that, you're probably kind of weird in the head, or you're a fighter. But Muay Thai will get you comfortable if you train at a real Muay Thai gym.
Yeah.
And this is an important distinction, because a lot of kickboxing gyms say we teach Muay Thai and all they do is kick and punch.
Right.
And they will never, ever address the clinch game, or they will address it on a very superficial level. Right. A good Muay Thai gym will spend just as much time on the grappling aspect as they will on the striking aspect. And they will marry those two together seamlessly. A bad Muay Thai gym is basically just kickboxing.
So would you be up for ranking, and I'm in a debate myself in my mind right now, because I want to rank Muay Thai B, which is higher than BJJ, boxing, wrestling, mixed martial arts, because that skill set, and especially elbows and the teep kick, are so great. But I'm concerned that there are many things to learn, for example, more than boxing at the same time, and if a year will be significant enough to make that difference. So I'm either B or B minus. What would you say?
Honestly, I would put it the same as boxing and MMA and jiu-jitsu for the same reasons. The tools are good, right? Yeah. But it falls under the same weaknesses, the exact same weakness as MMA. It's a combat sport. The objectives go toward the danger rather than to try to get away from it. Yeah. It has its weaknesses, just like BJJ doesn't address striking. Muay Thai doesn't address ground fighting, doesn't address getting up with somebody on top of you, doesn't address reversing position or any of that stuff. So yeah, I'm going to have to put it in the, what was that, B minus?
Yeah. Where B minus is the top level.
Again, good tools, good training methodology. Yeah. You're going to spar, you're going to get hit, all that other good stuff, but the exact same weaknesses as the others.
The next one, I actually pretty much don't know anything about that. The reason why, long story short, in the talk with Icy Mike, he just said F, and that was it, because he didn't know it. But that was not a great decision. So Pencak Silat.
Okay, Silat. Yeah.
Okay, because
this is an interesting one, because there are many different styles of Silat, but essentially it's Indonesian martial arts.
Okay.
And they do have some commonalities. There are hand-to-hand Silat systems. There are weapons Silat systems. There are combat sports versions of Silat, and there are traditional ceremonial do the forms and put on the uniform styles of Silat. There are McDojos. There are legit places.
Damn, such a wide
and there
world.
Are tons of charlatans.
Okay.
There are tons of charlatans. In Southeast Asia, like some parts of the world, there's a belief in magic and mysticism and this sort of thing. And a lot of people believe that through training of martial arts, you can develop magical powers.
Ah,
And this is a big problem. Like, if you watch McDojo Life, you'll see a lot of breakdowns of bad Silat practitioners misleading people and trying to convince the world they have magic powers and they can generate force fields around them and they can phase through solid objects. They can break load-bearing concrete pillars just by kicking them and nonsense like this. So there's a lot of nonsense that comes out of the Indonesian martial arts scene, just like the rest of the world.
okay.
But there's good Silat, man. There's a, I forget what it's called, but if you go down the Silat rabbit hole enough on YouTube and start looking for Silat competition, there's this weird combat sport version of it where they make a cage out of bamboo and they have two teams on both sides.
Exciting.
And then they do one-on-one fights, just one after the other, and it's kind of no holds barred.
Damn.
And
Kind of blood sport. Sounds like some.
yeah, it's kind of like blood sport. What was that movie? The King of the Kickboxers had a very similar premise. They'd make these bamboo cages and fight in them. I think it was to the death. In real life, it's just to the knockout, basically.
Sure. Wow.
I don't know what the exact rules are. I don't know if it's like no rules or kickboxing. There was some striking on the ground, but they would generally stay off the ground and just focus on punches and kicks.
Right.
So I don't know how deep the skill set goes. And I could say this about a lot. I just saw another Indonesian martial art just today. I was looking at it. They wear a uniform similar to a karate gi, and it looks like kickboxing. It has some fancy name, which is in the local Indonesian dialect, basically means pride fighting. I can't remember how to say it in their language.
Okay.
But this is a tough one to rank. It's a tough one to rank because there are legit guys that do it. And, Indonesia has a huge population. And there are tons of charlatans who do it and develop cults, magic cults around their fake martial arts. And so it's very hard to make the distinction. But at the end of the day, I think even the legit ones fall into the same hole as the other combat sports. You might notice I put most of the combat sports at the B- level.
Yeah.
Because again, it teaches you how to fight, teaches you how to get comfortable being uncomfortable, all this good stuff that you will need in a self-defense situation, but it doesn't address the underlying questions of self-defense. So, because I would say Silat is like half good and half crap, we're going to have to put it lower than the combat sports. So I'm going to give it a solid C.
Okay, so C with judo and kickboxing.
Yep.
Okay, nice. Okay. I'll have to look into Pencak Silat more. I don't know enough about it. Next one. I'll invite you to be the first one to start. It's
okay.
You're not, because you're looking for mobile phone, you're not seeing the tiny icon, but the tiny icon says in Russian, it says Systema.
I'm laughing because
yeah.
So when I first heard about Systema and I watched a bunch of videos, and you have these guys like bopping each other on the nose and flopping around like a fish and doing all this weird goofy stuff. And it doesn't look like fighting at all. And it looks like contact improvisation in modern dance. That's what it looks like.
Right.
I don't know if you've ever done that, but contact improv.
Did, so. Yeah.
Yeah, you did? Okay. Okay. Yeah. So you're basically just rolling all over each other, trying to like feel each other's energy and move in certain ways and try to make it look cool.
Yeah.
As much as you can, flopping around like a fish. And this is what Systema looks like. Now, I've had a bunch of discussions with various Systema practitioners, and one of them sent me a few links, and he said, okay, I realize that a huge percentage, probably most Systema practitioners do that weird, goofy fish flop thing, but this is how my school practices. And he sent me some videos of what seemed to be some pretty basic military combatives type of stuff that you would see in like a, like an IDF Krav Maga course or a US military combatives course or something like that. Nothing special, just basic hand to hand. Now, as far as the weird fish flop thing, that if you search Systema on the internet, you will find. That is the first thing you will find.
Yeah.
And that's the majority of what you will find. No, that's not going to save your life. That's silly. It's just nonsense.
Yeah.
As far as basic combatives, I put that in the better than nothing category.
Yeah.
But considering that was like one school out of 100,
Right.
you're probably going to get the weird fish flop thing. And so
Right.
I would say this is the more harm than good type of martial art. I'm going to give it an F. Put it in the F tier.
100%.
In fact, I might change Jeet Kune Do to F plus, since at least they punch and kick a little bit.
Right,
So-
exactly, right. Yeah, because I'm with you 100%. And for me, it's an F because I do believe that a Systema practitioner becomes worse than, I think a person who does not know Systema will fare better in a self-defense situation than a Systema practitioner for various reasons, but the main one is false confidence. It's hard for me to believe why they believe that the stuff works, but they do this, as you said, fish flopping things, and
Yes.
if they
And here's another thing, Rokas.
Yeah, go ahead.
Man, I have a lot of Russian friends, and I've asked every one of them, how common is Systema in Russia? And they're like,
Yeah.
what now? Systema. I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a Russian martial art. You mean Sambo? No, not Sambo. Systema. Never heard of it. That's the conversation I had with every one of my Russian friends. And these are martial artists who are well-versed in multiple styles, and they're, they're martial arts nerds, and they've never heard of Systema coming from Russia.
Yeah.
So take that as you will. I don't think it's a legit thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it's like, it reminds me of something that I heard a Navy SEAL person say it once, that he said, if you find something that's like Navy SEAL martial art or Navy SEAL watch, he's like, there's no Navy SEAL this or no Navy SEAL that. And but the reason these things exist, like Navy SEAL watch or Navy SEAL martial art, because that's a great marketing tool to make people feel like, oh, this is amazing. And I think the same in Systema is done with Russia. It's like Russian military,
Russian military,
right?
With Krav Maga and the Israeli military,
right? Exactly. It's just
anytime it's an exotic military, it just sounds more legit to the average person. I think.
Right? Exactly. But yeah, so I think I wouldn't be surprised if what you're saying is true, that Systema isn't even a real Russian thing or a thing in Russia. It's just outside,
or a very
of
niche thing in Russia, most likely.
Right. So yeah, F, 100%. Yeah, F minus. I'd say Systema. And your favorite, Taekwondo.
Taekwondo. Okay.
Yeah.
Taekwondo was my first martial art that I practiced. And I practiced it for a very long time. I competed in it, the World Taekwondo Federation style. That's the Olympic style. That's the one where you wear the chest protector and the headgear, and you can kick the body, you can kick the head, you can win by points, or you can win by knockout. You can punch the body, but almost nobody does it because it's hard to score by punching the body.
Yeah.
Okay. Taekwondo is a weird martial art because there's essentially the sport version and then the forms version. And the forms are derived directly from Shotokan Karate, which is another style that I've practiced.
Yeah.
So they basically just bastardized the Shotokan forms, which were also bastardized from some other karate style all the way back to Okinawa.
Right.
It's what they do, man.
Right.
So how good is it for self-defense? It's great for fitness, which is an important aspect of self-defense, because to compete in any combat sport, you have to be fit.
Right.
The kicks are great, and the turning back kick, the side kick, the round kick. A spinning hook kick generally takes the average person longer than a year to develop a good skill set with spinning hook kicks.
Right.
So we're probably going to have to take that off the table for the average woman in 1 year.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. Some can get it pretty quickly. It takes most people a few years to get any good with the spinning hook kick, and that's a big part of the Taekwondo game. If you don't have a good spinning hook kick or a good standing hook kick, which most people suck at,
Yeah.
you're not going to be very good at Taekwondo, because you have to be able to chain these kicks together in combinations. A lot of what's taught in Taekwondo is very sport specific, like the butterfly kicks. This kick has different names in different schools. That's basically repeated left, right, left, right, left, right roundhouse kicks to the body or body head. Now we saw this kick used once. Paige Van Zandt used it in the UFC, knocked out, I think it was Ashley Evans Smith, did one kick low and then the second one high in a skipping motion. Generally, this is thought of as a scoring technique, so you can score lots of points very quickly in sport Taekwondo, which is a terrible representation of what a real fight is. It's just terrible. Now, the good of Taekwondo, one, the athleticism, two, you will get used to getting hit and being uncomfortable and all of that if you compete. But not everybody competes. Not everybody needs to compete. You can get a black belt in Taekwondo without ever competing or ever sparring. You can get a black belt just by doing the forms. And this is true in many karate styles as well. And this is unfortunate. Now, let's just assume we're talking about like a competition style Taekwondo school. Also, that being said, the sport of Taekwondo has changed substantially since I was competing, like a lot. Oh my goodness. You know, back in the day, it was thought of as a knockout sport. It had its limitations. It was kind of silly looking, but you could still win by knockout. And that was a very common way to win. And to score points, you had to hit hard enough to visibly knock the other person back and make the judges across the room hear it. And now they have electronic scoring systems where you basically fence with your feet and just sort of have to lightly tag the other guy. You can score points and just hop up on one foot and go tip, 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 and tap him 3 times and get 3 points. And it's kind of silly now. You can still win by knockout, so that keeps it a little more honest than many other martial arts styles. But it's kind of a shadow of its former self, and its former self wasn't even that great in the competition aspect anyway. And then you have the forms, and the forms are completely divorced from the sport. I mean, take the knife hands, for example. These are grappling techniques. This isn't a karate chop to break a board. This is pummeling for a collar tie. This is pummeling for a reverse collar tie. This is reaching for an arm drag. These are grappling techniques that carried over from karate that nobody even remembers in Taekwondo because they're almost never taught. Almost. So because of that, yeah, I'm going to say it's better than nothing, especially because women tend to have stronger lower bodies and tend to be better at kicking than they are at punching. So a kicking martial art makes a lot of sense for a woman. I'm going to rate it above karate, and this I know Sensei Seth and Jesse Enkamp, they won't be happy about this, but I will rate it above karate for self-defense, specifically because in a competition school you will spar, and for a woman you will develop a better aptitude with kicking, which is what the average woman is going to be better at anyway. So what did we rate karate at? Like C something?
Yeah,
see it.
So karate is D, which is Bujinkan, Kali,
D.
Japanese Jitsu Karate. C minus is Kyokushin, and now Taekwondo, which is below Kickboxing and Pencak Silat and Judo. So it sounds fair to
All
me.
right, let's give it a C minus.
C minus.
Let's give it a C minus. Yeah,
I like that.
Right there next to Kyokushin, because again, Taekwondo is a sport that women can excel at. They can be very good at it. And you can learn it in a very short amount of time. Like you can learn all the important techniques of Taekwondo in a day. You can. You're not going to master them in a day, but
right. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's just 7 basic kicks, and about 5 of them are useful. The others are going to be useful if you're a phenomenal athlete.
Right. Okay.
But yeah.
C minus.
Another thing.
Yeah. Good.
Another reason I would place it above some of the others, even though it's going to be fairly low, is because you're going to rely predominantly on kicks. You are going to instinctually try to keep as much distance as you can between yourself and the other person, which is extremely important in a self-defense situation.
Right.
Keep distance between you and that other guy. If you can make distance to, say, throw a turning back kick, you can make distance to run and get out of there.
Nice. I like that. C minus. Sounds good. Sounds fair. And the next one, I was debating with myself whether I should put it on, but a lot of my viewers actually made comments like, "Oh, Ramsey Dewey told this story about Tai Chi and da da da." And so Tai Chi is on the table. Apparently, there's some
Tai Chi. Okay, yeah.
There's some very cool story you told that a lot.
So I told a story. I'll give a quick recap.
Yeah.
So back in, when was it, 2000, around the end of the year 2009, I went to train at a Sanda camp in Jiangsu province. It's north of Shanghai, with a friend of mine who is a judo coach, former member of the national team, just a really good guy to train with. He invites me to come train at a Sanda camp with him. I go there, I train for a couple of weeks. And it's good training, Sanda, Chinese kickboxing, you can punch and kick and do throws and takedowns, and it's cool. I love it. It's a fun sport. And afterwards, the Sanda coach says, "I want to take you to meet my Tai Chi master." And I was like, "Okay, sure, cool. We'll do some Tai Chi forms like the old people do in the park. It'll be fun." So I go there, and he's doing a form, and he's like stomping around, and he sees me. He's like, "Hey, come learn this form." I tried to do it. He laughs at me because I look silly doing it. And then he says, "Okay, let's just spar." I'm like, "That has to be a mistranslation. He just said spar. Tai Chi people don't spar."
Right.
He's like, "Yeah, spar. Fight me. Fight me."
Okay. Yeah.
Like they do in the UFC. He says, he's joking. He's 80 years old.
When was
he's
that?
This was in 2009.
Okay.
So he's a very fit old man. And so I think I'll just get an underhook. I'll just get double underhooks. He won't be able to do anything. And so as soon as I start pummeling for the underhook, he throws me. Just like hip tosses me on the ground, like I wasn't ready. And I get up, and we're not on mats, we're outside. It's stone tiles, and I hurt my elbow. I get up, I'm like, "Dang, what the heck?" And he's like, "Fight me with power." And so I'm like, "Okay." He surprised me. He knows a little bit. He knows some throws. Okay, I'll just knowing that now, I'll shut him down. So I go in there and I try to grapple with him again, and I try to get the underhooks. And again, as soon as I make contact, he throws me. And I get up again, and he's like, "Come on, fight me. Stop pretending to fight me and fight me," basically.
Okay.
And at one point, he catches me in a wrist lock. As soon as I reach for him, he pulls the body away and gets my wrist planted against his chest. And then he starts wrist locking me.
Okay.
And I start tapping out to a wrist lock. Apparently, they don't tap out in Tai Chi because he keeps cranking on it and laughing at me. And I'm like, tap, tap, tap. They don't do that. They let go when they feel like letting go. Anyway, so I quickly learned this is a grappling style, which is not what they show in the movies and in the video games most of the time.
Yeah.
They show Tai Chi as like this fancy, crazy looking kung fu striking thing. It's grappling. It is an old Chinese wrestling style. Wrestling folk style, basically. There are some submissions, some joint locks, some throws, some hip throws, some sweeps, a lot of sweeps, actually. Anyway, I got my butt kicked by an old man.
Yeah.
He out-grappled me. He out-wrestled me. And he shocked me to the core to learn what Tai Chi Chuan really is. It's grappling. It's predominantly grappling. Now, toward the end, he said, "Okay, now stop kidding around. Fight me, punch, kick, do that stuff you do in the UFC." And I said, "Okay." So I start punching at him, and he starts slipping like a boxer. He's slipping, he's bobbing and weaving. He's standing in a parallel stance, but he's still slipping. I throw a kick at him, he catches his kick, and he does a takedown. It's a golf swing takedown. It's the guy I learned this from. I show this on my channel. I got tutorials on it. It's one of my favorite throws to this day since I learned it from Wu Dao Shui, this Tai Chi master. So anyway, so I tell this story, and a lot of people are like, "See, Tai Chi really works." And other people are like, "Ramsey's delusional. Tai Chi's a bunch of nonsense," because they think I'm telling a story about magical, mystical energy. Like, if I focus my chi into my fingers, you can't bend. No, it wasn't. It was grappling. It was just sparring like you would at any gym. It's just this guy was really good at it. And I asked him, "How long did it take you to master Tai Chi?" And he said, "Oh, about 80 years. And I said, "Wait, you're 80 years old." And he said, "Exactly.
Yeah.
It took a lifetime." It took a lifetime. So, as far as Tai Chi for self-defense, how many legitimate masters of Tai Chi are you going to meet? I've been in China for a very long time, since 2009. And I've met one. I've met a lot of Tai Chi practitioners, hundreds of them. I've met one master who could fight. One out of hundreds. So your likelihood of finding a legitimate master of Tai Chi who can teach you how to fight, who can teach you the combat application of the forms, is very slim. And even if you find that guy, again, it's a wrestling style, and it's going to take you at least several years before you have some basic competence in it.
Right.
And the way Tai Chi is usually taught is not conducive to speedy learning. You learn the forms usually. Like, he made an exception for me sparring with me. But usually the way he taught, he would teach the forms and then gradually, little by little, teach his students applications of the forms, and they would do some sparring and some positional drills along the way. But it was a slow process. And as he said, it's not a race to the end, it's a lifetime pursuit. So even though I love Tai Chi and I love what I learned from Master Wu, it's not something I would recommend. Even if you go and train with that guy in his prime, I don't even know if he's still alive. I haven't seen him in a long time. But even if you meet a guy like that, you are not going to be able to defend yourself in 1 year with that system.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about old people doing the forms in the park, F minus. If we're talking about training with a master, he's going to teach you nice and slow and iron out the kinks along the way. You will not be ready in a year. So probably also F. I love Tai Chi, and I kind of hate giving it an F for self-defense, but I'm gonna. I
appreciate that. That sounds honest, and it's almost like part of me also wants to, especially after hearing that story, like to give it an F plus. But to be fair, I think, if we're talking about majority cases, F sounds fair. And we have 3 more left, and then we're done, which is the next one is Wing Chun.
Wing Chun. Oh, we're going to make a lot of people mad here.
Oh, yes, please.
They probably logged out or typed 7 angry comments already. You hate on every martial art. Now you're going to hate on Wing Chun too. Wing Chun is one of the more popular martial arts of Chinese origin out there, especially in the West. It's probably more popular in the West than it is in China, largely because the popular practitioners of Wing Chun fled China during the Cultural Revolution, went to Hong Kong, and then from Hong Kong went off to Germany and other parts of Europe. And so right now, probably the best Wing Chun practitioners are in Europe. They're not in China. They're not in Hong Kong. Most of them are Europeans. So it's easy to find a bad Wing Chun school. It's easy to find a bad Wing Chun instructor. It's hard to find a good one. So we're running into a lot of the same problems as Tai Chi. Again, it's a legitimate style that's often taught illegitimately. I mean, most people don't even remember what Tai Chi is supposed to look like, what it's supposed to do, what the forms are supposed to do. They just... Anyway, same thing with Wing Chun. We have these Wing Chun forms where they go out there and they do their thing. And I have a lot of friends who practice Wing Chun. My good friend Jordan Chow, he's a Wing Chun practitioner. My friend Nils, who plays Captain Krav Maga in my comedy videos, he's a practitioner of Wing Chun as well. And it's very interesting having trained these guys in mixed martial arts. And once in a while, they'll have like a light bulb moment, like, oh, we can apply this Wing Chun thing to this particular scenario. But it's like a once in a while sort of thing. It's not like
it's not evident.
This comprehensive system that will instantly allow you to develop badassery in a fight, which is kind of funny because that is exactly the reason why, say, Bruce Lee started training in Wing Chun, because he went from training in Tai Chi and he hated the fact that it was so slow. It was such a slow learning process. And he was like, I want to learn to fight right now. Give me Wing Chun. Because he considered it a more direct approach. At least you can punch and kick people here.
Right.
So it takes a long time to get any good at the fundamentals of Wing Chun.
Yeah.
So, and not all of the fundamentals of Wing Chun are good, to be honest. Now, hardcore Wing Chun practitioners, my friend Brian, for example, he's a Wing Chun instructor from Germany. He's very good at what he does. This guy can fight, but he also has experience in Jiu-Jitsu. He also has experience in Muay Thai. He's fought before. He understands what all this stuff feels like. And a lot of Wing Chun instructors don't. And if they do spar, sometimes it just looks like bad boxing. So I'm just going to have to go with averages and say the average woman going to the average Wing Chun school is going to have a subpar experience, and she's not going to be ready to defend herself in a year. I'm going to give it an F.
An F?
Sorry, Brian. Oh. Sorry, Jordan. Sorry, Nils. I'm going to give it an F.
I thought maybe D- because you learn to strike, but I mean, yeah, the strikes are not really great there, I guess, and you're not sparring.
Well, it's the methodology as well, and not all Wing Chun schools do this, but a lot of them, I would say the overwhelming majority of them, do. They essentially teach you to stand in front of the other guy and hand fight with him, with the expectation that he will stay there in the pocket and hand fight back with you.
True.
Hand fighting does happen in fights. Hand fighting and trapping does happen in fights, but it's like 5% of what the stand-up game is.
Yeah.
Whereas it's like 90% of what Wing Chun is. I mean, think about it for a minute. If you wanted to become a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu champion, world champion, okay? But you do that by only training, what's a popular BJJ drill that people do? Okay, let's say you only train the following positional drill. Somebody's mounting you, and they're trying to stay on top, and you want to get a reversal and get on top of them.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's all you ever do. That's your whole BJJ training. It's important. It comes up. It happens in BJJ. You need that skill set. But if that's all you ever practice, you will lose every single match. You will never be champion of anything, let alone the world.
Yeah.
Because you won't have all the skills you need. Wing Chun makes this mistake because it teaches hand fighting and it teaches trapping, which is a legitimate skill set. But again, it's 5% of what a stand-up game is, if that. So even if you go to a legitimate school, essentially they're teaching you wrong. They're setting you up for failure. They're setting you up to stand in the pocket and get a beat down by somebody who's moving around you. And I know some people are saying, but in my Krav Maga school, what's it called? Wing Chun school, we don't do that. We spar. And look, I've seen a ton of Wing Chun schools and how they spar, and it wasn't good. It wasn't good. Again, I'm going by averages, not the outliers.
Yeah. Okay. I like the explanation here. And the one before last one is Sambo.
Sambo. Ooh, I love Sambo. Sambo's awesome. I got my kurtka hanging up right over there, man. That's the Sambo uniform.
Right.
Yeah, that's the martial art I practice. I've trained with a ton of Sambo fighters from Russia and former Soviet republics. These guys are awesome. They're awesome. And even though Sambo technically includes everything, it's like MMA basically, but you wear the gi. Combat Sambo is interesting. You can also do headbutts. They do wear headgear, but you can headbutt each other. It's still a very streamlined combat system. So a few commonalities I noticed with Sambo fighters, they tended to be good boxers, good wrestlers, and very persistent with straight ankle locks, specifically the straight ankle lock. Like a lot of these guys knew a lot of submissions, but man, the one they would almost always go for was the straight ankle lock. That was like the bread and butter of their submission game. Take the guy down, get a hold of his ankle, and tear that ankle up. So there's a lot of good in Sambo. If you go to a good Sambo school, then yeah, you'll get a lot of the benefits of MMA, Judo, Jiu-Jitsu, boxing, wrestling, all this stuff. But at the same time, I'm going to have to put it in the same exact tier with all of the other combat sports.
Mm.
Right? It teaches you how to fight against someone who's striking you wearing clothes. And maybe I'll actually put this one a little bit higher.
Oh, B?
Let's maybe give it a B, and I'll tell you why. Because it does address, specifically because of the uniform. Now, they wear a jacket, and they wear shorts, and they wear, they call them Sambo boots. It's kind of like a wrestling shoe with a soft leather sole.
Uh-huh.
So, as far as combat Sambo goes, it's almost like MMA, but it's MMA in the gi. We could probably throw German Jiu Jitsu in the same category, except it's not as widely practiced, and so you don't have athletes who are as good.
Yeah.
And if you want to get good at a martial art, you need training partners who are good. You need 3 types of training partners: people who you can smash. You need the noobs to build your skill set with. It's like lifting the light weights before you lift the heavy ones. You need people at your same skill level so you can honestly test and assess yourself. And you need people who are better than you so they can teach you. Right? So there are a ton of individuals who are way better than us at Sambo who can teach us things, right? People who are just levels above average who can teach you. They're easily accessible, well, in certain parts of the world, right? In Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, all these former Soviet republics, you can find Sambo schools, right? But maybe in the West, in the US, it's going to be hard. You're going to have to go out of your way to find a Sambo competition or a Sambo school. And if you find one, it might not be a good one because they might be the only one in town. They might be the big fish in the small pond. So if you say live in Russia or live in that part of the world, then yeah, go to a Sambo school. That'll be great. The uniform, why is that important? Because it teaches you to fight someone who is grabbing you. Don't you get that in Judo? Yes, but without the strikes. Don't you get that in Jiu-Jitsu? Yes, but without the strikes. And as soon as you add strikes, all of the techniques, the way you set them up, the way you finish them, become very different. You can use strikes as a distraction. You can use strikes to create an opening, strikes to help you pass the guard in ways that you wouldn't be able to. Otherwise, strikes to sweep the other guy, strikes from the bottom, strikes from the top. It's anyway, I could talk about that forever, but just the fact that there's cloth to grab and they do grab it and they do teach you how to deal with that. Somebody grabbing your collar and punching you in the face while controlling you with that collar at the same time. That's a valuable skill set to have. So if you're in a part of the world where Sambo is common, you're going to have some good experiences learning a lot of valuable tools. It'll teach you a few more tools than you would get from MMA, where you're fighting shirtless and slippery. I don't think very many women are going to take their shirts off to go out there and fight a bad guy on the streets. I mean, God forbid, maybe it will happen to them against their will, but more likely than not, they're going to have clothes that are going to be grabbed. So that is an important skill set to master. But because it's a combat sport and it doesn't address the real questions of self-defense, I'm going to have to put it just above the other combat sports.
Yeah. Well, it's still great. I'm very happy we have something at B, which is nice. And then the very last one on the list is something I included because you know about it more than most humanity, is Sanda.
Sanda. Oh, yeah. Sanda. If you don't know, Chinese kickboxing, Sanda. It's a combat sport. It's performed either in a boxing ring or on a lei tai. That's a raised platform with no borders. So the rules are a little bit different if you are competing in a ring or on the lei tai. If you knock the other guy off the platform, points for you. If you're in the ring, you can't knock him off. So essentially, you score points in Sanda based on punching the other guy more than he punches you, kicking the other guy more than he kicks you. Head kicks score higher than body kicks. Throws and takedowns also score, and knockout is an automatic win, obviously. And the throws and takedowns, it's different than wrestling because you have to remain on your feet to score. So it's Sanda is essentially a streamlined version of a bunch of different martial arts. It is a mixed martial art. A big misunderstanding people have is that it's competitive kung fu. Not really. That was the original intention behind Sanda when the Chinese Wushu Federation codified it way back when. They wanted to have a venue where different martial artists of different styles could compete on even terms. And so they allowed for striking and they allowed for wrestling in the Chinese style. Chinese wrestling, Shuaijiao, is, or Chinese folk wrestling, I should say, is a sport where you throw the other guy, but you remain standing. So they included that aspect in Sanda, right? There's no ground fighting, no elbows, no knees. Some people swear on their mother's grave that, yeah, it totally does, but no. Modern Sanda competition does not have elbows or knees. There's no inactive clinching. If you tie up, you have to attempt to throw the other guy. So it's a fun sport. It's a great sport. It's a lot of fun. I love it. There are certain training tendencies you'll see in Sanda that you won't see in Muay Thai, like the use of the sidekick. Man, a good Sanda fighter is an expert at using the sidekick in many, many different ways. Sidekicks to the head from close range. This is something a lot of people don't think about. But these are fairly advanced skill sets. Now, you can become a pretty decent Sanda fighter in a short amount of time. You don't need to know every technique. You need to excel at a few of them. If you're a good puncher, like I know Sanda fighters who are just great boxers and they know enough about pummeling to stop the other guy from throwing them. And they know enough about kicking to check a kick or catch a kick. Other guys are like kick catching experts. They will catch your kick and throw you around. They're like wrestling experts, and they'll clinch with you, get the double unders and throw you around Greco-Roman style. Now, the availability of a good Sanda school or a good Sanda camp is slim. Like even in China, there are probably about 10,000 individuals who train in the Chinese sport university system, which is pretty vast. But there are about 10,000 Sanda practitioners in the Chinese sport university system right now. I know that probably sounds like a lot, but there are 1.4 billion people in China. That's less than a drop in the bucket. That's a molecule of the drop in the bucket as far as participation goes.
Yeah.
And outside of a Chinese sport university, you're going to have a hard time finding a Sanda gym. So availability is going to make this a tough one. If there were good Sanda gyms everywhere, I'd put it up there with the other combat sports.
So
but because it's so hard to find one, and then you're probably not going to find a good one if you do find a public Sanda gym. I'm going to rank it below the other combat sports. So what did we give those B-? Let's give it maybe a C+.
Got it. Two more questions before we wrap up. So one, imagine an average woman watched the whole thing, and now she looks at the table and she's like, oh my God, there's no martial art that is suitable.
Martial arts don't work.
Yeah, martial arts don't work.
That sounds like an Icy Mike video title. Martial arts don't work.
So what's your suggestion to an average woman who wants to become much more safer in a year?
Oh man,
it's a hard one.
That's a very good question. The average woman wants to become safer in a year. Now, it kind of sounds like I said, don't get out there and train in martial arts. I think you should. Everybody should train in martial arts. And for some of the reasons we brought up, it does build confidence. It does build athleticism. These things are very important. It does teach you some skill sets that can be useful when push comes to shove. Now, it's important to train in a good one. Combat sports are probably the best way to go because they will teach you real skill sets. They will teach you what real pressure feels like. They will teach you how to fight. They will, right? They may not address, they probably won't address the exact scenario you're going to find yourself in, but they will give you some tools. Whereas others will promise to do so and fail to deliver on that promise. Now, if you are genuinely concerned about being attacked by bad guys who overpower you or multiple opponents or something like that, if that is a genuine concern, my advice, arm yourself with a weapon that is easily accessible, that is legal where you live, that you are trained to use, and not easily disarmable. Okay, not something you carry in a purse and have to fumble around for, but something that you can just pull right out within a second and have readily available. You know, if it's pepper spray, make sure it's in a place where it's accessible, not hidden deep in a purse somewhere where you have to fumble about. Right? If it's a gun, make sure it's in a holster where you can get to it easily and not hidden in the dashboard of your car when you're off on a walk in a neighborhood where you might actually get attacked. Okay, so weapons are a game changer. Which it's kind of funny to hear me say this because I'm not a weapons YouTuber, if you will, but this is the honest truth. If you want to level the playing field, give yourself every advantage. I always tell my students who come to me for MMA training or boxing training or kickboxing training, I always tell them, you do not want a fair fight. You don't. Why are you squaring up straight in front of me? You need an angle. Why? So you can knock the dude out. You want to hit him from the side, not from the front. This is a fair fight from the front, right? You need to cut the corner. You need to get an angle. You need to get under the guy. You need to get to him where he is not protecting himself so that it becomes an unfair fight, a lopsided fight. Why do you take people down and mount them? So you have an unfair, one-sided, lopsided fight where you have every advantage and the other guy has nothing. If you're in a fight, you want that. You want to take everything and give nothing. Okay? So a weapon, that's game-changing. But you have to train with it. And again, that's more than just going to a firing range and shooting stationary targets. You have to understand what it's like under stress to calmly wield a weapon efficiently. Okay? And there are some excellent instructors out there who address those issues. I don't, but people exist out there who do that sort of thing. Okay? The second thing, get as strong as you can. Get as athletic as you can. And I know some women are adverse to this because they think if I lift weights, I'll get ugly and weird and look like the Hulk or something. I don't want to do that. Look, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen unless you dedicate your life like a full-time job to looking like a bodybuilder. You won't. Get as strong and as fit as you can. That's important. If you can't open your own jars and bottles, fix that. If you can't do a pull-up, do that. If you can't run a 50-yard dash in a reasonable amount of time, work on that. These are self-defense skills. Okay? If you can't control your own body, somebody else will. The third thing, get some friends. Surround yourself with friends. Don't be alone, man. This is the big thing. People always say, oh, BJJ is terrible for the streets. It's good against one guy, but on the streets, the other guy's friends will jump in. I'm like, wait a minute, but I do BJJ. I got like 50 friends who also do BJJ. When I go out, I hang out with them. I'm not alone. That's the thing, man. I'm not alone because I made some friends at the dojo. And so making friends is huge. Making friends who know how to fight, even better. Making friends who know how to fight, who are experts at concealed carry and using weapons and staying composed under pressure, even better. What else? You don't have a friend? At least get a large dog, man. Large dogs are useful. Now, it's seriously a bad guy wanting to attack you. Why do people get guard dogs? Because they have a dog making noise. Even if it's a little yappy dog, it's going to make noise, and a person is going to be much less likely to break and entering in the house with the yappy dog than the one without. Right? Somebody who's going to make noise, who's going to make a fuss and draw attention is going to be much less likely to be a target than somebody who is silent. So, silence, man. Silence is the enemy here. So that's my take on it. I'm not a self-defense expert. I'm not a woman. And yet we're talking about women's self-defense.
Yeah.
Take that for what it's worth.
These are great. I really like them. Actually, they're a bit of a different spin than what I usually am used to hear and what I would have thought about myself. But once you said, I'm like, yeah, makes a lot of sense. I really appreciate you saying those 3 points. And there's this final quick game I wanted to play with you with the table. I know you don't see it as well as I do, but I'll guide you
Yeah.
through it because we emphasized a lot the fact that an average woman training this martial art for a year. I'm curious to see how much the table will change and not change if we will say 5 years. 5 years of regular training.
Okay.
So let's start from the top, which is Sambo. It's right now it's at B. If an average woman trains it for 5 years, would you level it up?
5 years.
Yeah, would you level it up to A minus or keep it at B?
Yeah, with all the combat sports, I'm tempted to bump them all up a notch, like all the combat sports.
I'll do that.
Because 5 years of training is obviously way better than 1 year of training. In 5 years, you can become a proficient fighter.
Right.
In 5 years, you can legitimately learn to defeat the larger, stronger, untrained guy. Yeah. So in 5 years, you will get a representative skill set from that style or system. So yeah, let's bump those up 1 notch. But I'm still going to leave them below the S or even the A category, just because again they don't address the real problems, if you will.
True. So right now it's Sambo's A minus, BJJ, boxing, wrestling, mixed martial arts, and Muay Thai is B. I'm just double checking if I should bump up Gracie Jiu Jitsu.
That's a good question. Now, by Gracie Jiu Jitsu, I'm assuming you're training at one of these Gracie garages, not at Torrance, California, with Henner and Huron themselves, but the average Gracie University Gracie garage. I would probably leave it there.
Yeah, because
that's going to be a very mixed bag. Again, the information will still be exactly the same. The instruction might not be. Right. Within 5 years, who knows? Maybe those guys are prodigies, and maybe they'll become legitimate black belts, and become the best teachers ever. And maybe they'll still suck. We don't know.
Right. I like that.
So I'll leave that one.
I like that one too, because I think if the quality of teaching is poor, then if you train longer, you just learn to do better bad things. So I mean, like mediocre things. So yeah. Judo, I think it's fair to bump it up 5 years.
Yeah, bump that up. Within a year, you'll learn some basic survival skills, how to fall. Within 5 years, you'll learn how to throw people around.
I think same with kickboxing, Pencak Silat, and Sanda.
Yeah, well, I'd still leave Silat in the middle. And here's why, because I gave it a pretty average score because, again, there are legit places and probably an equal number of magical McDojos.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm going to leave that one average.
Nice. We're at C minus. Kyokushin. I want to jump in and say probably no bump, because it's a lot about mental toughness and whether you do it for a year or 5 years. Maybe there's somewhat of a difference, but you're probably like more or less.
I would say a Kyokushin fighter who's trained for 5 years is probably in a good place to transition to another combat sport like K1 or kickboxing or Muay Thai or MMA. But
if they stay there,
hasn't learned any additional skill sets that will make them better at self-defense.
Right. So I keep it there. What about Taekwondo? Does it bump up after 5 years or no?
Well, you'd definitely be better at it in 5 years. Your kicks would be a lot better in 5 years. You'd be a lot better at distance. And that's one of the big things in Taekwondo. Sport Taekwondo is distance management, at least old school sport Taekwondo. I'm not sure about the modern version. So I'm speaking from my own experience there.
Sure.
Maybe bump it up half a notch there. Why not?
Okay, sure. Why not? And then we're at D. Bujinkan. I think it stays where it is.
It's going to stay there. Like 5 years of dressing up like a ninja and waving a sword around you're still going to be the nerd who dresses up like a ninja.
Right. Kali. or Filipino martial arts, eskrima, arnis?
Kali, you're going to be better at stick fighting, but you're going to have the same issues. You won't have
Right.
the sticks in real life unless you're a psychopath who carries sticks around with you everywhere.
Japanese jiu-jitsu.
Probably the same, because we're running into the same issues of it might be a decent gym and it's probably going to suck.
Right. Karate. That's probably the final one, which begs a question.
Oh,
5 years of karate.
now this is a tough one, because 5 years later you might be an expert at doing the forms and nothing else. 5 years later you might have pretty punches and kicks and still be terrible in a fight. 5 years later you might be a complete badass, depending on the style.
Hard one. I guess.
So I'd bump this one up for the same reason that I bumped up Taekwondo, just because the two arts are so similar
Right.
in many ways, especially the sport versions. So we'll bump it up, same as Taekwondo.
And I think it's probably guessable that I'll name these: Aikido, Capoeira, Jeet Kune Do, Krav Maga, Systema, Tai Chi, Wing Chun, maybe Wing Chun. But aside from Wing Chun, I'm pretty sure that these, even if you train for 5 years, doesn't make a difference. Would you agree?
Well, as far as athleticism in capoeira, you'll become a phenomenal athlete in 5 years
It's a
of
good one.
consistent capoeira training.
Yeah.
So that's a good deal. Like, a lot of people say running away
Right.
doesn't work in street fights because you might not be fast enough. Well, what if
What
you're
do
a
you
better athlete than the other guy? Then you will
Right.
be.
Okay.
Right. But you have to train to be a better athlete. Then again, capoeira is not training to run away. It's training to do some cool tricks and flips and
Right.
stuff.
Yeah. But I think I'm up for leveling up capoeira to D. D is still like, we're looking at Bujinkan and Japanese jiu-jitsu. If you're like ripped and you're like, really physically strong, that's gonna help you. I think, would you agree that we can bump up capoeira after 5 years?
Yeah, we can bump it up.
Okay. Aikido, I think, stays the same. Jeet Kune
Yeah,
Do,
most likely.
Krav Maga, Systema, Tai Chi.
Systema is going to stay put, man.
Yeah.
It's going to stay in the basement forever.
It's gonna get worse, actually. But it's gonna degrade.
May it burn in heck, man. May it burn in heck.
Yeah. And what about Wing Chun? Does that change after 5 years or no? We're at an F.
Well, I'd say the same thing about Wing Chun and Tai Chi. If you're training with a good instructor, if you're training with a master who understands what those styles are actually for and how to train them well, it's going to be a longer process. So yeah, I would bump them up after 5 years. You will be a better fighter after 5 years of Tai Chi grappling. You'll be a better fighter after 5 years of Wing Chun hand fighting than you would be without.
Nice. So that's the minus. That's
You won't
really
be great, most likely, but you'll be better.
Right. Well, it's D minus. That's not a huge compliment anyway. But yeah, it's interesting to look at the ranking table. Looks different than before. So 5 years meaning makes a difference. But I think it's important to still fall back to what you said in the previous question, that in the end, martial arts are great, but self-defense is not about martial arts in like the essence of it. Additional things need to be done to address the self-defense question, I think. Nice. Well, great. That officially wraps up the whole ranking. I wanted to say thank you so much for being so generous with your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
It was fun. I learned a lot.
It's been fun, man.